Welcome to episode 202 of the Reptile Gumbo podcast. I have Travis here tonight as my co-host. How's it going, Travis?
It's going well, James. How about yourself?
Good. Katie will be here shortly. She is doing, she's the one that does like parent stuff. I don't do all that. But she will be here shortly. Let me get to our stuff so we can go ahead and do our... I'm going to get to it. It's here. All right. Let me go ahead and do all of our sponsors. And then we can get into the show. And the reason that I made Travis come be on the show tonight. I needed somebody that understood big words. All right. Lil's Shop of Horrors. Lil's Shop of Horrors is a small feeder and pet supply business based in San Antonio, and they regularly schedule feeder meetups around San Antonio as well as other neighboring towns and cities. They offer shipping on their feeder insects, ice pods, and are working on starting shipping on their feeder rodents too. All feeders are raised on a nutritional diet that optimizes the health of the reptiles and the amphibians that consume them. Go give our friend Lewis a shout out over at Lil's, Lil''S Shop of Horrors over on Facebook. If you're in Texas or anywhere really, talk to him, see what he can do to help you out. He's got some great feeder insects and some feeder rodents. He can help you out. Moving right along. Hey, my phone just told me that Katie's home, so she'll be here shortly. Herps. The next Herp show is Corpus Christi, February 24th and February 25th. Then over to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, March 2nd and March 3rd. Then back over to Bryan College Station, Texas, March 9th and March 10th. And then the Rosenberg, Texas show, which is our new home show, which is March 16th and March 17th. It's like, 20, 30 minutes from the house. Slidell, Louisiana, April 6th, April 7th. Austin, Texas, April 20th, April 21st. West Monroe, Louisiana, May 4th and May 5th. And then down to Lake Charles, Louisiana, June 1st and June 2nd. As the upcoming Herp shows, come see us. We will probably be at Lake Charles. We will be at Rosenberg for sure. I don't know. We'll see what else we're going to. The ones during the summer are much easier to make since I'm a teacher. VivTech. If you need an LED UVB bulb, check out VivTech products. They have them in stock. They just made a whole video. I posted it over on our Facebook page. You can get you an LED UVB bulb that will last you forever. I think they have a 2-year warranty, but they'll last you past 2 years.
2-year manufacturer's warranty, and I think Ryan said they've clocked them at 4 years.
At 4, yeah. Try and get that out of any other UVB bulb you've been using. It's not going to happen, which is my problem because I really want the dimming ones, and that just means I'm going to have to buy a whole new bulb, and then I don't know what I'm going to do with these bulbs, and I can't wait for them to run out because it takes forever. But they'll go at some point.
What I need to know is if Ryan and Erica will let me send back 2 of the first calls that I have, because at the time I ordered them, I needed them, but now I actually need a jungle instead of first calls. And I really don't want to have just 2 bulbs sitting here doing nothing for me.
Well, I happen to know the person that owns the business, so we could see if they could do that.
Put in a good word for me.
Put in a good word. If you do need to order a bulb or a smart device or anything, use code GUMBO22 and save 15% on your order. It does help that we get a kickback from that. But still, go use code GUMBO22. Help us out. I think I've hit all my sponsors. I'm good. I think we can get into the show now.
All right.
Hold on. I'm going to be good. I'm going to pull up the title that I put for our guest because it's about half a mile long, and I want to make sure I get it right. And I know I'm going to mispronounce some of it. So here we go. All right. So our guest tonight, go ahead and pull him up, and I'll introduce, is Bill Ryerson. He's comparative anatomist / herpetologist of Cornell's College of Veterinary Medicine.
Ooh. That was great. That was perfect.
Anatomist was where I really thought I was going to screw that one up. I first saw that word when you sent it to me, and I'm like, that's not a word. But it is.
It is a word.
It is.
I hope it's a word. Otherwise, I've been lied to for a few years, and I've got more questions than.
Well, that's science, having more questions than answers. So,
yes, that's definitely science.
So Bill's on here because Travis shared an article or a paper in our discussion group several weeks back on, is it snake teeth shape versus striking, the way they strike. I know the title's much better. I butchered the shit out of it there. But,
no, you're doing great. This is exactly what.
The tooth shape, position, and size all reflect how a snake seizes its prey.
Yeah, they bite you. They
bite you.
The only thing I need to know for sure is that arboreal snakes hurt like a son of a bitch. That's the one thing everybody needs to know. They hurt like a son of a bitch. So maybe we can get into why that is and why like a corn snake does not hurt as much.
I mean, you've really actually hit the nail on the head, and you've also like leaned into some of the future work that I'm trying to do. So to take a couple steps back, there's a relatively new snake book that came out October 2023 by David Penning, and he asked a bunch of us in the field to sort of contribute chapters to it. And I've been playing around for a long time with like how anatomy interacts with how snakes do stuff. And to probably no one's surprise, when you think about snake teeth, everybody thinks about fangs. It's just fangs. That's it. That's
Fucking,
the book.
What a nerd.
I don't even have a copy in my house. That's amazing.
As soon as I saw this was coming out, I pre-ordered it because
I had a feeling if you mentioned a book and it was about snakes, that Travis probably had it.
this looked awesome to me.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten all the way through it yet. In fact, I've only barely cracked into it, but
I say I'm chapter 2, so you best like get moving on it. I don't know what happens after chapter 2, but I'm sure it's great. But like we've been talking about fang shape, and fang shapes come up a lot recently. There's a lot of different groups that are trying to figure out like why certain species have certain shaped fangs, and people keep arguing that it's diet. That if you look at certain cobras and you go into predominantly the cobras, but also like the rattlesnakes and some of these other venomous groups, if it's got this shape of a fang, that means it's eating this type of food item. And a lot of my old work was basically just describing the mechanics of how snakes strike, like how do they make contact, how fast they're moving, like really basic stuff. I just happen to have a camera that can do it. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I buy it. Like, I don't think it's just diet. I think you see like these animals, and anybody who's kept hots, like you know this, they strike differently. Unfortunately, I don't really have access to, some of the elapids and some of the vipers. But I have noticed, as you mentioned, that when I've been bitten by my Brazilian rainbow boa.
Yes, those teeth are horrible.
Right? It's a little bit worse than in my case, like the king snakes, the garter snakes. Fine, whatever. They can latch on and I'll go get a bucket filled with water. It's fine. So I started asking some questions. I'm like, well, what about the teeth in other snakes? And there was a resounding shrug. Nobody cares, right? If it's not fangs, why do you care?
Well, Travis has kukri.
Still hurt.
Travis has kukri snakes with their fucked up teeth. So.
Oh yeah, a kukri snake will mess you up.
Mm-hmm. I've heard a couple people. Someone was telling me about one of those recently. Like, yeah, it was fine. I was totally just watching it, and then all of a sudden it moved, and I was in a lot more pain than I thought I would be. I was like, really? You don't say? Can't imagine.
James posted a video this morning about why you shouldn't boop snakes on the snoot.
That's true.
And it's a rainbow boa in the video.
This woman has this
thing. Oh, is it really?
Struck on the face.
She puts it up in her face like she's about to kiss it, and it gets her right on the face.
It gets her right on the face.
Yeah. Stupid.
I've kept rainbows long enough to be like, you know what? As long as it's not looking directly at me, I'm probably okay, but I'm still going to keep a very suspicious eye on this thing.
Yeah.
My Tannenbar scrubs are the same way.
Oh yeah.
Like even my little one, she's only like 3.5 feet. But when I've got her out, as soon as she turns towards me, it's like, and get in my arms.
Yep.
Well, that was the first time I saw my big adult male rainbow yawn. Because I had red tails prior to that point, and I assumed rainbow boas, they seem like kind of like that, and so they probably got similar teeth. And then it yawned, and I was like, holy shit. These are like emeralds. Like, what the hell is wrong with these teeth, and why do they have them like this?
Fun fact, though, that was the snake that got me over my fear of snakes because he had the personality of like a 90-year-old.
Yeah, he was awesome. I loved him.
And he moved in slow motion. Everything he did, he was one of the coolest snakes. But that was the snake that got me. Now you had a baby red tail that was super fast. It could fit between my face and my glasses.
Yeah, but they're all fast when they're little.
And it was super fast, and it was like brand new. And I was like, no, this thing is too much for me.
Rainbows come out of the mom biting.
But it's funny because we've never had another rainbow with his personality.
No, none of his babies have his personality.
None of
The
them.
mom's not that there's not bad, but no, he was by far the best.
It was so like that was the rainbow boa that started me. So now I'm like, what the hell is wrong with all these
Well,
other snakes?
That was
I
also
don't
that was also
understand.
my first pet snake. That was my own, and that was a horrible purchase. That should not be anybody's first pet snake. Don't ever do that. That they have certain requirements, and I don't know how he lived through all of it. He lived.
He was like 22.
He lived
when
through
he
my
passed away.
my entire learning process of how to take care of a rainbow boa.
Yeah.
I mean, he died at what, 17, 18?
Mhm.
So,
No, he was almost 20.
he was 20?
Yeah.
That's right.
That's a terrible first snake to have.
Yes,
'Cause
horrible.
you had him
Yeah.
the whole time
No.
we've been together. and
Yeah, no, I
we've
went to
been
a reptile show and like, that's pretty. And of course, the guy behind the table was like, yeah, you should buy it. Okay. So I bought it at 17 years old. I was like, yeah, it's a pretty snake. I don't know anything about this, but it's a boa. It can't be hard.
Yeah,
That's what the internet's for.
The internet was different back then too. It was not as
It's
useful.
not what it is now. Sorry, I'm late.
Oh, but yet,
Oh no.
Katie, Bill, Katie. There we go. So-
swap out Girl Scout cookies.
So let's get back. Your article, you decided you wanted to find out about sharp, pointy teeth.
Oh yeah. And so at the time in the lab, I had a couple rainbow boas, and I had some juvenile reticulated pythons. I had 2 adult retics, a Burmese, a couple sandbows. Like I just had this smattering of species because a lot of the students buy them as pets, and then when they graduate, families don't want them at home, and suddenly I've got 30, 50 animals in my lab.
Or they get caught in the dorm with it and they can't have it.
That may have happened once or twice. I had completely by myself in my home, and I'm like, just in case anybody is listening. And so we were just like doing the high speed strikes, and we were just trying to figure out these king snakes are just kind of like lunging at these things. They're not really like striking, because everybody's you when you see like snake strikes on YouTube and Discovery Channel and whatnot, they always show vipers, right? It's always like a rattlesnake or a sidewinder striking its prey super fast, wide open game. And then you see like a king snake or a garter snake do it, and you're like, that's not the same animal.
Yeah, no, a garter snake, they just walk up to it and just start eating.
Yeah, and so I was sort of curious. I was like, I wonder what the differences are here. And I actually got turned on to the idea by a now retired snake guy, Dave Kundle, who was at Lehigh. And Kundle's done like everything. And he and I talked about it, and he's like, oh, you might want to look at the teeth, because I had this idea with boas a long time ago, and I never really did it. And I was like, all right, I've got a couple red tails, like I'll try it. And I had an undergrad do it, and snakes are supposed to have like the teeth are supposed to be the same all the way through the mouth. As long as they're not fangs, the teeth are the same. And anybody can look at a red tail and go, no.
No, yeah.
They've got those,
those front teeth
at the front. They're just beasts. And so with a student of mine, we were able to show basically like, oh, those teeth in the front, they're super upright, right in the lower jaw. And basically, what I'm gonna do is, I've got a lot of practice at this now. Rat, snake. Those front teeth are the ones that hit the rat first. So they make contact and they like get into the rat. All the teeth in the upper jaw are those like really kind of curved backwards teeth. And those will just slide over. And so they hit, those teeth slide over, the body comes over, it starts constricting, does its thing. If they miss for whatever reason, they'll hit both jaws at the same time, those curved back teeth, and they'll like drive through the rat. I've got a couple great videos where like it rips the rat like right out of my students' forceps, because it's just moving so much faster than they can react. Needless to say how fast I could react. And now those like curved teeth hit and they pull back and start to wrap it up. And I was thinking, there's got to be more here. There's no way red tails are this special.
So while you're talking, I'm gonna play a video. Mm-hmm. I've got the video of the retic doing it.
Yeah.
And so I want to show that while you're talking.
So we started to like explore, and so when we first did the retics, because like you can feed baby retics basically every single day if you want to. We started collecting some of those, and so you'll see this is that like upright strike. Yeah, the retics on that right side there.
Oh wow.
And so it hits that upper jaw, or it hits the lower jaw first, and then just like rotates over, starts constricting. Your king snakes, super not fast, but you can see how like tiny those teeth are. Like they're shorter, they're more broad, they're more curved, they're not as
They will
upright.
jack you up.
Yeah, right. A baby retic will just ruin your day.
Play it one more time. So if anybody's that's listening to the podcast, I will post the video over.
You have to hit the back arrow, not the
Oh, that's
play
weird.
button.
Yeah.
Thanks for the lesson.
And so we saw that like you could basically, no matter what snake we got in the lab, we could basically break them down into these two groups. So your strikers are moving really fast. They're getting to like 3 meters a second. They've got these big upright teeth in the lower jaw. They have these really recurved teeth in the upper jaw. And then your other ones, what we were calling lungers, they're not moving as fast. They're making contact with both jaws at the same time. And the teeth all have this kind of what we think of as like the generic shape. They're super curved. And by the end of it, it was just like you could show me a video of a snake striking, and I could go, I bet you I know what those teeth look like.
Well, and they're striking in a curt, like while spinning, like that's that whole bottom jaw hitting and then the top coming over.
Yeah.
They're striking while wrapping at the same time. It's crazy.
Yeah. And the only ones that don't wrap and strike like that are, we got a few videos of copperhead striking. I went to a colleague down in South Carolina, and they basically do the exact same thing. Now, obviously, the teeth, like the teeth in the lower jaw of a copperhead, are weird. They barely have any. They have like maybe 3 or 4 on the lower jaw. And they're not super upright or anything at all. And the kind of idea I'm working with is that's because copperheads don't hold on.
Yeah.
Right? They strike, they're out of there. They don't want anything to stick in. You know, if the fangs go in, the venom's injected, they're absolutely 100% out. And so you can see kind of there on this image, and this is from the paper that I wrote with the undergraduate Pete Van Valkenburg. If anybody's watching and needs somebody who can do scientific illustration, this is about as good as it gets for me. So you're going to have to look elsewhere. This was a really hard.
So much better than I could do.
You also were feeding on ping pong balls. That's got to be a weird diet.
Yeah, well, you know, like you take physics 1, you're like, pretend everything's a sphere in space, and then just don't worry about the numbers. So you're like, you can see those big upright teeth in the lower jaw. They're the ones that actually hit. And then once the food is sort of in the back of the mouth, those teeth are just there to make sure it doesn't escape, right? It's going to be latched in. At that point, it's sort of game over. And so we've got a ton on these different species that just show like I can start grouping every single one of them into these 2 categories. The groups I'm missing, and this is a little bit if you know people watching, listening have these species, just throwing that out there.
Travis, this is gonna be you probably.
I have no elapids. I have ideas on how a lapid should strike. I've seen some stuff on obviously like king cobras feeding on other snakes is everywhere on the internet.
Yeah.
And I have a very limited sample on the arboreal species. All of mine are like semi-arboreal. Right. So I've got like my juvenile reticulated pythons, which will feed in the trees. I've got red tails, and then I've got Brazilian rainbow boas. I don't have anybody that you would sort of say is like 100% arboreal all the time. You know, as much as I'd love to get an emerald or, a green tree, like I don't quite have those yet. Because I think the thing that's happening there is like, you think, emeralds to me is like the textbook of this. They've got those big, gnarly upright teeth in both jaws.
Yeah.
And so this sort of running idea is that they can't, right? The way the red tails do and the way the retic did in the video, they can't just hit and launch their whole bodies over because they're perched on something. Their food maybe is perched on something else. Maybe it's, a flying bird or something like that. And so those upright teeth basically have to make sure that they grab it out of the air, basically, and have to be able to withdraw that back to where their original perch is.
Did you find the rainbow boas to do the curve as much as say a boa constrictor does, or is their strike slightly different? I just wonder because their teeth are so much more emerald than boa constrictor, just like the size. I wonder if if they don't curve as much when they strike.
So they don't. They'll open their mouths a little bit wider, and they will not launch themselves all the way over the way that like the retic did in the video. You'll get that curve over, and then they'll immediately rotate back, and they'll bring the food back with them. They are a little bit more, the individuals I had are a little bit more heavy-bodied. They were certainly more used to feeding terrestrially.
Yeah.
And because they were somewhat difficult to film, when I'm feeding them, they are feeding terrestrially. Very, very limited stuff on getting them to actually feed from a perch. But they definitely show, when you start really looking at the behavior in detail, they do seem to just like, I've got it, it's coming back with me. I'm not going to try to like launch my body and sort of constrict it where it was. I'm bringing it over to me.
So what I'm hearing is if anybody is near Ithaca, New York and has an emerald, an Amazon tree boa, or green tree pythons, you need to go visit Cornell and find Bill.
You don't even need to
closest I can think of might be Keith McPeak working with Sanzinia.
Oh, that'd be but they're not really. They get called a tree boa, but like if you've ever taken care of them, they don't really tree boa. Really? They like to lay on the ground a lot.
They don't tree boa.
They don't.
Like, that's a verb
they
now.
Oh yeah, I was tree boaing this morning.
I mean, they've got the whole green thing down, at least half the population, and they got the look, but they're kind of on the ground.
That was the closest I could think of.
You can get this because I don't need. I'm pretty good on the high speed data. I just need to see where they make contact. So
Warren Booth might be good because he keeps a lot of the Russian burger eye and stuff.
So anybody with an iPhone, because you can do that or any phone really nowadays, you can do that the slow mo and you can slow it down frame by frame. I don't have anything arboreal or I do it. Everything I have is definitely terrestrial.
Yeah.
I've got Candoya, but
they're
trying to get them filmed while eating would be a little bit of an adventure.
A friend of mine just tried to send me because he was like, I've got womas, and I was like, film the womas. Like, if I ever say no to that stuff, like just shoot that guy. He's the imposter. And he came back and goes, it turns out it's a bit of a struggle to film them. And I was like,
well, the problem with womas is woma's feeding response is so crazy that like you don't have time to prep for anything. Everything is food in front of a woma. I'd be interested to see. Have you done the sand boas?
I've done the sand boas.
Just owning sand boas, knowing how fast they are from going slug to biting when you have food, it's crazy. And the way they can strike back, and it's just they're one that surprises me. So I'd be very interested in how that goes.
Super high accelerations. They do strike. They were definitely. They don't end up with like really big top speeds because they tend to strike a lot closer. Yeah. Right. They don't have the dramatic like snake is way over here, food's way over here. Right. That viper, the retic, where they're really far away, they'll come out.
Yeah, they lack that whole neck needed to really get that strength. They're just all body.
Yeah, so you get them, and all of a sudden, like they're here, and they'll accelerate just insanely fast. They don't end up hitting really big top speeds, but they have like a really narrow gape. Their teeth kind of just look like king snake teeth. They're certainly not, they're nothing like the kind of needle-like ones you would see in the other boas. Yeah. And so they ended up kind of like in the lunger category because of just where they sort of fit.
I just imagine a slow-mo of them is just like someone take a sausage and just throw it at a rat. That's got to be what it looks like when a slow-mo.
Yeah, they definitely, and I mean they're the most precious little things. I don't know so much. But you're just like you're getting nothing, right? Because most of the animals, they're sitting in the arena. They're always watching me or my students. And you put the food down, and they'll sort of turn at it. They might turn like back at me just to see what's going on, just to make sure I'm not doing something stupid. And then you're sort of moving the rat around, and then they'll hit. And the sand boa will just, rat comes in, it doesn't move, nothing's moving. Are you dead, alive? What's going on, buddy? And then all of a sudden it has done its thing. So the number of the sand boas were super frustrating because you can't predict when they're about to do stuff. And they will, like, it's nice because when you're doing the video, right, you've got this camera set up, you've got these lights, and it needs to be striking like perfectly perpendicular to the camera, because otherwise your math just gets bad. And the sand boa could be facing right at you, facing off at an angle, and it's like, fine, I'll strike it whatever angle I need to. I don't care what your stupid setup is or how it's Friday and you want to go. Like, I don't care about any of that.
This is why I don't just reach into a sand boa tub. I find a hook, I get them, and I'm like, we're not just doing this. They will strike you out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. But they were some of the. We ended up shooting a lot of videos from them from up top, just to see how quickly and how far they would turn to approach a prey item. And we're hoping, if someone gets off his butt, to get that written in the next year or so.
So I have a question, and you may have covered this before I got here tonight.
We kind of talked about it, I think maybe before we got on here. But go ahead. I know you're going to ask. Go ahead.
What am I going to ask?
Go ahead.
I don't think you know.
Is it not what we talked about earlier?
What did we talk about earlier?
Just ask a damn question.
So what is the point of this research?
That was not what I was thinking.
Why this?
Because.
But no, that's a valid answer. If that's the reason.
It's science.
Totally
the reason is because.
Okay. I mean, that's fine. I was just curious.
I am curious, and I hope I'm not alone, about how these things evolved, where they come from, how they got there. They are the only group, right? So you have lizards, and lots of groups of lizards become legless.
Yeah.
And for the most part, this is a harsh way of saying it, it's kind of like an evolutionary dead end.
So wait, there's more than one type of legless lizard?
Oh yeah, there's European. We have European legless, but there's a ton of. We're used to the
US,
Eastern legless.
The European,
here in the US.
2 or 3 different ones in Australia. Like
the Europeans
have
make me feel dumb. This is not okay.
Like with skinks. They're a whole
Europeans
bunch.
that big white one you always see. Well, you don't see them show as much anymore, but the huge white ones. That's the European ones. We have the really colorful Eastern ones.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they show up. There's a bunch of different families that have a group that's become legless, and for the most part, it doesn't go anywhere. You don't suddenly end up with 500 legless geckos or legless skinks. Snakes are different, and so there's been a lot of ideas about so why are snakes different? Why is it that snakes happen and all of a sudden you've got a ton of them, and it doesn't happen with the lizards? And so I'm very interested. My bias is how they feed. Is it something about, that whole, all the bones in the skull being able to move, that cranial kinesis that gave them an advantage? All of a sudden you can eat big food items. That's it. That's the gateway.
And are we sure that, do we know the order in which that happened? Was it that, then no legs, or no legs, then that?
So there are some lizards that have the lizard people would say they have kinetic skulls. As a snake person, I guess I'm biased there and saying it doesn't really move. But a lot of the what we think of as the kind of older lineages of snakes don't have super movable skulls, but they're also really specialized. They're the blind snakes. So they're underground, feeding on ants. They've got their own crazy weird specializations. The idea originally was that it was constriction allows for the explosion to happen, because you've got a couple of limited groups, and then when the boas and pythons basically figure out how to constrict their food, everything goes nuts from there.
But now your research is saying it's not the constriction, it's the teeth.
I'm going to say the teeth are part of that role, that there's more, that there's
more involved with the teeth than we realized.
Yes, and that the teeth are another symptom.
I would say it seems like a sort of hand-in-hand thing. If you go back and watch. Were you there for the video, Katie? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Which
was.
structure goes fast. So if you watch that video, the teeth and the way it hits, the teeth are giving it something to stick to that animal, but
Right.
they're also acting as a fulcrum for the body to be able to start that constriction real
Right.
fast. Versus when the king snake gets it, it bites and then it brings it back into its body. So it's
Right.
kind of more a bite and
And it
side
like
swipe
crushes
than that.
it
Yeah.
into its
over the
body.
top.
Yeah, and for high school evolution example, since so I just
Is
taught.
that what you just taught?
I just taught. You got to imagine that over that time of the evolution of those teeth, there were a lot of them where they weren't as curved. They probably missed meals, and that dies out of the gene pool, and so you end up with boa teeth the way they are versus them being all like king snake teeth and being less curved. So it works its way towards that direction. But
yeah, I think the what most people would say now is that it's the ability to eat really big food items that makes it happen. And so whether like how much of that is the skull can move to do a bunch of swallowing stuff, how much of it is the constriction allows you to deal with something that's bigger than you. Like how do you bring down, to do the ridiculous example, right? If you're a Burmese python and you're trying to pull down a really large mammal, that's hard to do when you don't have those limbs. So, constriction allows you to do that. Having a big skull that is able to like move around, all those individual bones can move around, also helps you do that. And then the teeth kind of serve as that interaction point between okay, so like how do I grab onto something that's this much bigger to me, this much bigger than I am, and then also allows me to get into constriction.
has anybody looked into so when it comes to diet of some of these snakes eating larger animals, have they looked into the evolution of that? Is it they eat larger animals because that's what is there, or is it more energy efficient, and so that is the reason they go that way instead of a lot of there's a lot of species that don't have the ability to do that, and they're eating smaller meals more often, with like colubrids, eating smaller meals more often. Is there a risk reward there? Is it the reason they're eating big stuff and they've evolved in that direction to eat big stuff?
I don't think we've got a good handle on that because there's so many specializations that these groups have when it comes to eating the big stuff. I mean, Steve Sikor, who's in Alabama or Auburn, studies the digestive tract. And the reason he does it is because they will basically shut that whole system down when they're not feeding. It completely atrophies down all the way, and then it strikes something, and all those genes turn back on, and the system starts rebuilding itself.
Yeah, we've talked on here before. I know there was an article at one point that came out that basically said the internal organs shrink; they get smaller, use less energy, and then when they eat, they get bigger. And that was that argument for keepers that want to power feed their animals. And you're like, well, you're never giving your animal that chance to relax. And its organs are always working overtime.
Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
think the heart triples in size.
Crazy.
And the digestive tract, does something similar. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Going off the size thing, I think it's also going to be particular to species and environments and stuff too. Like you're going to see niche partitioning between sexes and stuff. An excellent example of that is in boas, especially like the Candoya boas, where the females are so much bigger than the males, and that way the males eat the smaller prey, and they are not competing for resources with the females, which need bigger prey, more prey to be able to reproduce and perpetuate that next generation. So there's a lot more dynamic in there than just I get bigger so I can eat more prey. There's other factors that play into it.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and especially our northeastern, our Nerodia, right, where the females get those bigger triangular heads, and they're doing they're eating frogs and some of the bigger sunfish and whatnot, whereas the males don't have that broadening of the head, and so they end up separating not only prey size but prey shape as well. And yeah, so this the way all of these things interact with each other, in some ways is really exciting because you're like, oh, cool. Yeah, I can explore this idea. I can explore this idea. I can work with this person who does this. But at the same time, when you're like, oh, does this mean we know this? And you're like, no, sorry.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question. And again, I I just married into this, and I teach English. So like I've been doing argumentative writing for the last 2 weeks. Because that's what we're learning in 4th grade right now. But it really fascinates me how people come up with ideas of what they want to research, because my brain doesn't think the same way that any of your brains think. But that's okay, because we need people like me too. So if you're doing this research, is there someone else out there doing the same research, or is that not how it works in this field?
So, I mean, that's a really great question. So oftentimes we feed off each other. So,
Okay.
like I'll go to a conference, and I gave my presentation on this stuff, and I had a bunch of people asking questions, like similar questions, like, oh, well, what about sandbows? What are they doing? What about this? What about this? And often it depends on, for a lot of us, like what do we have access to? So there was a woman who did a lot of stuff on like the elapids, the cobras, and some of the other fixed fang snakes. She's from Australia, and she has access to a lot of those animals. I happen to have kept I shouldn't say way too many, but I've kept a lot of snakes in my time, and I've known people who've kept a lot of snakes in my time. So you'll notice that when you read a lot of my stuff, I do some work with some of the local species, but a lot of mine are the very obvious, easy to acquire pet trade species, right? I've got ball pythons in my data, red-tailed boas, Rotix, Burmese, so many king snakes. And so a lot of it is kind of like what we can get access to. And some of it is definitely, I mean, there are always, in any field and whatnot, there are people competing with each other. I've certainly had ideas, I don't want to say stolen, because they did way better stuff with it than I ever would, but like that stuff happens. But often it's just like, you're rarely the only person to have an idea, but there's so many ideas out there, and there's so many things to explore that most people end up kind of partitioning off their own little stuff.
Yeah.
And
That
then
makes
if they're
sense.
awesome, we work together.
So you have one big umbrella, but all the different raindrops are hitting the top, and everybody's raindrop is different.
Yeah.
Okay.
A good way to like get an idea of it, Katie. So James posted up a link to all of Bill's publications and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go in and look up some of them,
just remembered what we were talking about.
The ones that you can access, and you read through them, and this is the way a ton of scientific papers will read. You'll have something like, however, a behavior can also play an outsized role, as in Arnold's paradigm, that can also explain variation in morphology and performance, Garland and Losos. So you keep making these references to other people's work.
Yeah.
That you have used to help build your stuff. And you'll also find that then you go read some of those other people, and then they have found what you have written as well, and they're integrating it in. So it's a great big Gordian knot of everybody
one
kind of
huge research.
I hated all of them for 4 years while I was in college, and I had to do research and then do reference pages.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like, basically. It's basically one big, massive reference page, and you just have to hope that you're not overlooking something that needs to be included.
You always overlook something.
You always are. And actually, that actually reminded me that a lot of the original ideas from the teeth stuff came from a woman named Carly Cohen, who is now, she was recently at the University of Florida, and she just shifted. I can't remember where she's now. She was looking at it in like super deep sea fish, right? Some of like the big angler fishes and the viper fishes, where they have like those huge teeth. And then in between them, they'll have like little teeth that you just cannot figure out, like, this thing's not doing anything. What's going on? And she did some really fancy engineering work that showed that when it does bite down on something, it actually helps distribute like how the forces get transmitted along the jaw so that they don't break teeth and don't break their jaws. And then somebody else went, oh, that's a brilliant idea. I wonder if that's what like crocodiles are doing. It turned out it was not what crocodiles are doing, but crocodiles do have like differently shaped teeth depending on their age and whatnot. And so you often see that where you're like, I'm confused about the teeth stuff. And you start looking and you're like, oh, this person did this with these deep sea fish. I wonder if that applies to my system. Or I saw this person did X, oh, I wonder if I can do that instead. Which is where a lot of those. So it's one of those where, like you're not only reading the snake stuff, and you're not only reading like the snake and lizard stuff, but then you're also reading like just tooth stuff in general, or you're reading like feeding stuff. I was reading today a bat feeding paper because I don't know, I might need to know something about bats someday. So you end up doing that, and sometimes it's really inspiring because you're like, oh, that's a really clever way to solve this problem. I wonder if I could bring that.
Yeah, I find all of this very fascinating and very inspiring because, I quilt, and James teases me about it all the time. He calls it my old lady hobby. But like
You're the youngest person that quilts.
I'm not. Anyways, but like I can get like this image in my head of what I want it to look like, and then I can pick the fabrics and make it work. And people will look at finished products and they're like, how did you come up with that? And I'm like, I don't know. I just saw it in my head. And that's how I feel like when I listen to y'all talk about like research and projects or experiments and stuff like, I'm just like, because like, why did that fish need those teeth? Okay, well, coming up with the idea to me, I'm like, okay, that's doable. I have questions about all kinds of stuff, but like, how do you even know where to start with how to research that?
So what I find funny, I was looking through all your articles, all your papers and everything you've written, and then looking at the year and looking at what you're studying, it definitely feels like early on you were in someone's lab that dealt with frogs, and then once you got out of that, you were like, all right, we're not doing frogs anymore. I'm done.
My own thing.
I'm going to snakes. There's a lot of like frogs and salamanders in the earlier ones, and then later on it's like
some of that salamander stuff was cool.
Oh, the jumping stuff?
How the salamanders jump? I mean, that's like, again, that's one of those things. It's like, who would think, you know what?
Right there.
What's the mechanics behind salamanders jumping?
Yeah,
and what happens if they don't have their tail? What does that do to it? It's
and
like,
then like knowing
I didn't know that I wanted to know that, but damn, now I want to know that.
Yeah. And like you were talking earlier about the video and how like with Sambos you have to film at a certain degree and a certain
trial and error.
But I'm just like, how does your brain even come up with how to figure it out?
Well, here,
I mean, that's part
I'll
of
show you
it.
how it works, Katie. James, can I share screen?
I don't know if it'll let you.
Let me try.
See if it'll let you.
Like I'm sure there's other research out there that has done some of this stuff.
I mean, the salamander jumping one's a great story because I was my advisor at the time. So I was at University of South Florida doing my master's degree, and he studied salamander feeding. And we would go collect salamanders. I was doing my own frog project, and we caught this little salamander, and it jumped out of my hands. And after a string of expletives left, I was like, "How do they do that?" And he was like, "I don't know." And I was like, "What do you mean no?" He goes, "Oh, like we know they jump, but no one knows how." And I was like, "All right, fine."
Now I gotta collect damn salamanders.
Yeah, now I gotta collect salamanders. I just want to graduate.
Okay, so am I sharing?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
Okay, so earlier Bill was talking about like how he's looked at red tails and things like that, but he hasn't been able to look at any real, truly arboreal things.
Right.
And I went to this site called Morphosource. I love this site. You can find all kinds of 3D scans of things. And so this is the skull of a BCI. And if we zoom in on it now,
I know what that is. Thank you so much.
Thanks for you know.
I can't get it perfectly horizontal.
Yeah.
But
look how they lock together.
Oh, we're totally using this website in Zoology Club next week. This is
you
cool.
can see how the teeth, it's got that recurve that we saw in the earlier picture of the snake biting and the thing. So then if we go to, let me share a different screen.
Y'all ever see sometimes when they get their lips stuck on their teeth? I've had them every now and then. They get snagged on their tooth. I'm like, God, you look stupid.
It's like this weird little Elvis lip that they got going on. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. So then this is a Hortulanus.
All right, you're gonna have to say what that is.
I don't know what that is.
This is an emerald tree boa.
Okay.
And as Bill was talking about it, and I was thinking, I wonder if Morphosource has got these skulls. If you look at the skull here, you can see that those top
fuck those teeth. Those are horrifying.
Bless it.
They're a lot straighter. Which goes with what Bill was talking about earlier, how those straight teeth, they're used for really getting that grip as soon as it
Yeah.
impacts. So Bill was speculating, I wonder if the arboreal ones, if they have a different tooth structure and if they have different strike methodology, because their habit is causing them to have to hit their prey differently. Now, we don't know this for sure because, again, he would need some people taking videos and stuff. But just by, just hearing him talk about that and me thinking, I wonder if Morphosaurus has something, you can look at this and you can see there is a difference.
I got it for you.
Tooth structure,
Yeah.
which would then very much kind of support the idea of what Bill was saying earlier of, we see a difference in tooth structure of strikers versus lungers.
Right.
Now we have two different kind of strikers. We have the semi-arboreal strikers like the boas, the retics, and things, but more highly arboreal ones have gotten a different tooth structure than those semi-arboreals. So that might at least hint at, okay, this would be a potential third different sort of strike mechanism.
I've got a way.
So that's the brain at work right there. How you come up with these crazy ideas. Now we just need somebody to film.
I can connect this. I can connect this for you, Katie. You know how when you open Pinterest for one thing,
Shut up. Yes.
and then an hour later you've looked at like something that's not even related to that one thing, and you're way over here.
Yeah.
It's that.
Yeah. So I was looking at that, and I also love Morphosaurus. A bunch of my skulls from the analysis are from Morphosaurus. You saw like on the emerald there, like a really stark line. Like here are the upright teeth in the front, and then here are the much shorter, much more curved teeth. Probably I want to say around tooth like 5 or 6, and all of those behind. So I'm gonna out myself here. I'm willing to put a very small amount of money, very small, a lot for me, but small amount of money, to say like those other teeth, those shorter teeth, are in no way involved in prey capture. That those are going to come in, right? So it's not even. It's like tooth 5, tooth 6.
Yeah, they're probably just there for holding it while it works it down the throat.
Yeah.
Yep. So like they're only really going to come into play once the prey has been like killed, we're done with constriction, and now we're sort of transporting it back into the esophagus. Otherwise, they're not going to be involved in prey capture at all.
Well, I've always figured the big long teeth are there in arboreal snakes because their margin for error is much smaller than a boa on the ground, right? They've got a split second to catch something, usually in mid-flight or about to jump off a stick, and they either have to hold it or it's gone.
Yep.
And so they've got to get them in them quick, whereas the guys on the ground can do a little more.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the other one, the other great one that would be really interesting to see, and again, no one's going to let me get videos or keep these because apparently these places have rules. Like a Theris, like the African bush vipers.
I can get you some. I know a guy that breeds them. I can get you some.
What?
They're the prettiest snakes on the planet.
Maybe they'll be a tax write-off if they donate them to his.
We have tons of them in Texas because there's a lot of folks that like them down here.
Oh, yeah. I think Phil Wolf might be able to get you in touch with some people.
I mean,
too,
that sounds like a good tax
write-off. He loves
write-off.
a Theris, right?
England.
Donate them.
Why
to
can't I think
their...
of England's first name? He does all
Nipper?
the venomous. No, not in England. God damn it.
I got nothing.
I'm friends with
But
them.
they
all.
like
Basically, you're just grown-ups doing science fair projects because you come up with your idea, and then it's like,
Alex.
these are all the ways we can. Oh,
Alex England. He breeds little bush vipers.
These are all the ways we could figure it out, and this is how we have to prove it, and this is how people are gonna believe what we say, and it's giant.
They don't
you
believe
do
anything
science.
Yeah,
you do science fair projects for a living.
Yeah, I mean,
fancy science fair projects.
The number of projects, especially like the ones that have like the students as co-authors, are definitely ones where we are just like it's Friday afternoon and we're either like doing the animal care stuff for the weekend or we're just just chatting, and the students will be like, yeah, but wouldn't it be weird if they did this? And you're like,
why'd you have to go? Why'd you have to go there?
Why do you have to go? They're like, now we gotta set up new protocols, and I don't know what that's gonna. All right, hold on. I know what I'm doing tomorrow morning.
I just love that a lot of
That's so cool that that's your job.
A lot of your science in snakes here really does go into the hobby. Like a lot of it can be transitioned into how things are looked at in the hobby. And I know it drives Travis nuts, and it drives me nuts. As someone who has a degree in biology and keeps snakes, to watch people that barely passed high school science try to explain science on Facebook groups drives me fucking crazy, especially when they try to explain natural history of an animal and they can't actually name the country it's from. That part gets me. So like a lot of this is really cool. Like some of the there was one I thought was interesting. It was had to do with oh damn it, I don't want to mess it up. I'm going through all captive breeding alters head morphology and behavior in reptiles.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was that project was also a like serendipitous thing. So I was given a rainbow boa. She was close to 6 feet long. She had, I want to say her head was maybe 2 inches long, if that. And the story behind it was that the keeper was totally fine with mice, but we're not okay with rats.
Damn.
And so they would go, right? Like it's an adult mouse every 3 weeks. Then it's an adult mouse every 2 weeks. Then it's an adult mouse every week. And they were basically got to the point where they were feeding this thing like an adult mouse every single day.
That's how some they used to do some carpet pythons. I remember they used to have mousers that would just eat mice, and like you'd have people feeding like 15 mice to a carpet mouse instead of 1 rat. They're like, it won't eat rats. I'm like, they don't fucking feed it until it eats rats.
But yeah, so like this thing had this tiny head, and so I was curious. I was like, I want like. Some people have said this. It seems to be really hit or miss. I think boas, it does, or the boa constrictors, it doesn't really work this way. Actually, I think Warren Booth might have done a paper on this where they showed that like you can alter the diet of a red tail, and it doesn't mess with their head at all.
I will tell you, I did get a red tail once from a guy who was in the military, and then they found it, and he couldn't keep it anymore. And it was probably 6 foot when I got it, maybe 6.5. But the head was the size of like a 4-footer. Like it almost felt like he had power fed it and got it to 6 foot really quick. But the head didn't grow at the same speed as the rest of the body. And so
weird.
This thing should be eating like jumbo rats, and I'm here feeding it medium rats to try and get it to catch up. By the time the head caught up to the body, it was over 8 foot long. Like that was when the head finally looked like it belonged on this body. It was so weird when I first saw it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it a couple times, and so I got a bunch of garter snakes and raised them on like different diets, and I was basically able to induce that head shape change. So you gave them like these were Eastern garter snakes, and so I gave them like one group. I gave like I was really like mad scientist going like I'm going to give them the biggest nightcrawler pieces I can find, like these big like blocks of earthworm. And the other group is just going to get these like the skinniest rosy red minnows I can find. And then another group is just going to get random stuff. And so I was able to basically get really narrow, elongated heads in the snakes that were eating the rosy reds, and these shorter, blockier heads on the ones that were eating the night crawlers. And it's something I'm very, very interested in what captivity does to both anatomy and behavior, mostly from a conservation perspective, because how many reptile species and amphibian species can you think of that our solution to them being endangered in the wild is to breed a metric ton of them, release them, and then kind of like hope for the best. And I know certain groups.
Louisiana pine snake's the only one I know for sure because that's what they do. But
indigos.
Indigos, yeah.
Yeah, indigos, yeah.
I posted the paper in the discussion group, but here is a key figure from that paper that Bill was just talking about.
So yeah, so here you've got the PCA analyses are basically like I create a shape and it takes a bunch of variables. And when you do the analysis, it condenses all those variables down to like what is called here like a single PC axis. But it's often like a bunch of measurements of either like some element of shape usually. So if I remember correctly, PC1 here is
PC1 is head and PC3 is width, or is length. PC1 is length and 3 is width.
Okay. So as we started to like feed, right, the earthworm group is really, really far to the right. And so they are getting much broader heads, whereas the like fish group is, much more on the sort of negative PC3 axis. So they're getting much more narrower heads. They are bigger for their age than comparative wild snakes. And this is just because I'm not allowed to feed them that infrequently when they're in the lab. Like there are rules on how often I have to feed them. Whereas ones that get like both food items have elements of both populations. They're like, okay, they have to have like broader heads to deal with the earthworm pieces, but they also ended up with a little bit more elongate because they are also having to eat the fish.
But none of them are anything like the wild type.
None of them are anything like the wild type.
What's the time length on this?
So this is 1 year.
Man.
So you can imagine, for some of these, species, because I know in New England anyway, there's a lot of turtle head starting programs. There are ones for wood turtles, Blandings turtles, spotted turtles, and I've got some data that needs to come out because they'll grow these turtles. Like these turtles grow so fast in these programs. I think my data has it that basically I could get you in 1 year, I can get you a turtle that is the same size as a 9-year-old turtle in the wild.
That can't be good.
Dang.
Right? Like that's kind of the hypothesis. Like there's no way that level of accelerated growth is ultimately
healthy.
I was like, nature didn't choose it to grow that fast. Even if you take out of the consideration having to find food and hard years and the reason they don't grow so fast, but still nature, that's just not how big they're supposed to be. We look at people trying to get ball pythons breeding at like 18 months. You're like, that just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. And just because it's size doesn't mean it's sexually mature or.
Yeah.
I know in the turtles, they often do it because they're trying to get past those predators, right? They're trying to make them just big enough that the raccoons aren't a problem. Because I didn't know this till I got involved in this project. The biggest killer of hatchling Blanding turtles in like Massachusetts are chipmunks.
Wow, I would not have guessed that one.
Because they grab them so the Blandings will like nest in people's yards. And then the hatchlings emerge and they start meandering down to the ponds. And it's like those scenes you see where the sea turtles all emerge and it's just like the gulls and everything else. Apparently it's like that, but with chipmunks.
They left that out of Alvin and the Chipmunks. I didn't see Alvin going after baby turtles.
He wasn't getting a hula hoop. He's coming after some Blandings. But yeah, it can't be good for them. Same thing like with some of the power feeding that happens. Like, I mean, yeah, they'll grow fast, but like, whoa, there's so many like skeletal elements that are having to be built, and all of these organs that need to change shape. We already talked about like every time you feed them, the heart gets bigger and the digestive tract gets built up, and like to keep it at that elevated for that long. If you're trying to restore a population, are you really doing them that service? I will say, I think the Orient Society that does, and the Georgia Aquarium who do the indigo snakes, they do a lot of, like most of what we know comes from that group. And they're really good about doing like the soft releases. They're being very careful about like varying food types. Because I don't think, Blandings and spotting turtles are getting too many pellets in the wild, right? I'm sure there's not a natural supply of pellets coming through, but like, yeah, what are we doing to these? To these critters if that's crazy. The goal.
Well, and like what you saw with the garters, and I'll be the first to admit that I'm not going to change the way I do it, but these mono type diets, right? I feed rats to my boas. That's what they get. They're only getting rats. I mean, obviously, I know in the wild that is not their diet, and maybe that explains why sometimes when you look at some of these wild boas, their shape is definitely different than what we're seeing in captivity. Like if you look at enough boas, you can look at the head of some of these wild boas, and someone gets a picture, and they're not the same as what I have in a cage in the other room. So maybe these these varied diets, people that own like Crebos who are feeding them everything they can find in a Asian market, that's probably the best thing for that Crebo than going, here's a rat every week.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's so weird because you'll get the species that I think about as being like really, really mono diet are not even that monodiet, right? Like they're all eating rodents, right? I'm thinking, certainly some of like the rattlesnakes come to mind as being like they're grabbing desert rodents, and that's all they're grabbing. But even then, a kangaroo rat is different from a house rat, which is different from a wood rat or a swamp rat. Like they even within like what you would think of as like, oh yeah, they feed rats.
Yeah.
There's so much difference, and it's difference in what those animals are eating. Like it's just it's hard to think about and try to like wrap your head around what would I have to do as a keeper. Because I'm with you. I've got a freezer full of rats, and that's what everybody is getting. And they don't even get African soft furs because I can't I can't afford it.
Yeah, no, that's expensive.
Yeah.
So of all these things that you've looked at, because again, like I said, I looked at all these things, and a lot of them seem like they really could tie into how we keep stuff. What do you think is kind of the most tangible thing you could take from everything you've looked at that a keeper could go, oh yeah, I see that, I could change that, or that makes sense? Goes into the hobby. What could the hobby absorb from all of this? The easiest, I guess.
I would say it depends on what you want out of your keeping. If you want an animal that is going to behave like it would in the wild, I think a bunch of it is, we probably feed them too much, and we make feeding too easy.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I have, on one of my papers where I talk about how bad ball pythons get at feeding over time, because if they miss, I've got videos of them just whiffing on a rat, like a dead rat that is just barely being shook, and they're just way over here, and they're shaking their head and doing all this stuff. If I took the rat away and didn't feed that animal that week or that month, very quickly it would turn back into a much more wild type animal. But we don't do that, right? Because you don't want to waste that rat. You don't want to take food away from your animal. I'm the same. I don't want to take food away from them.
Yeah.
We have to do a little bit better. If we want more wild type animals, we got to treat them more like wild animals, right? Cages that are, what we would say is like full of enrichment, right? Change the environment every couple of months. Give them different environments to work in. They don't get fed on nice even schedules and stuff like that. If you're working with animals because you're the aesthetic value. I don't know if there's anything I could say that would really impact what you do.
Yeah.
So I think it depends a lot on what you want out of the hobby and what species and groups you're working with, right? If you're working with a tree boa, let's say, or like an emerald, and it is a nice just display animal, then make it a very obvious display.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the problem. Sometimes you see these arguments on Facebook groups, and it kind of comes down to what you're saying. Like, how natural do you want natural to be with them? Like, look, in the end, is any of it really natural? Not really. I mean, we're keeping snakes in a box in a house. Like, it's not. It's how fancy can you keep that box, and how can you vary up things to change it so it's not just a plain box in a house. But I always have that argument that it's not natural. I mean, look, we're picking traits that nature didn't choose, and we're emphasizing certain things that nature would say, well, that's stupid. And we're not really looking for the behavior. Most people don't want the actual natural behavior of their animal, because go pick up a boa in the wild. It's not going to let you hold it. Like that is the fact that we've gotten to where you can take them out and people are like, it's like a puppy dog. I'm like, yeah, but that's not nature. Like, go pick up a banded water, like any water snake, pick any Nerodia.
No, pick up a Nerodia, yeah.
Any of them. They are not like a puppy dog. Like, nothing about them, but that's nature. Like, and so it's a weird balance of I guess the argument of we need to keep them as natural as possible. As natural as possible is not. It depends on how you define that. I mean, because in reality, it's not even close.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between a wild snake and a captive snake is it can be massively apparent. My African mole snakes, Pseudaspis, I have a captive bred female, and she's super curious, super calm. I can take her out. I can handle her. She's fine. I have a wild caught male. That is probably the angriest snake I have. I would say that he is even more angry than the kukris. If I come into the room, I can hear him hissing and growling in his cage. He will stalk along the back of the cage, and when he feels that I have gotten too close to that cage, he will strike all the way up, 30 inches from back to front, and he will hit the glass or he will hit the side of the cage.
Well, let's face it, there's nothing you're going to do in that cage that makes it feel natural for that snake. Right?
No,
that snake was in nature.
And I have tried. Like I did what I could. I've got rocks in there. I have plants in there. I have taken the rain gutter stuff, and I have made underground burrows because they are super prone to going into burrows underground and chasing things down. And he makes full use of those. But he can be in one of those, and I can hear him hissing and huffing because he knows I have come in. So he knows that he's not in the wild, but no matter what I do, it's not going to be the wild to him, but he still is very much programmed in that wild mechanism of, I hate everything. Everything wants to eat me, so I'm going to kill it. And so behaviorally, he's just absolutely going to be different than a captive born snake. And there's nothing you can do to really change that.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of us in the hobby, it's not necessarily it's not why we keep these animals and whatnot. It's because, and this was sort of the question I know you asked on the Facebook page, was that, with these head starting programs becoming more and more prevalent as more and more species start being bred in captivity to restore these old populations, how do we help those groups?
Yeah. Because
if they're going to release them out to the wild, we do want animals that are going to be functioning and whatnot.
Yeah, we want them to survive.
Well,
otherwise, what's the point?
Well, and I think that's why it's a tricky thing. So I have a problem. So Louisiana pine snakes are near and dear to my heart because I live in Louisiana. I own some of them, and their whole natural history I think is amazing. I know people personally that could probably breed far more Louisiana pine snakes on a regular basis than the Audubon Zoo and the Memphis Zoo, who are the ones in charge of doing it, right? But they have to be the ones that are in charge of doing it because that's how the whole program works. And then on the other end, the other problem is, we have a lot of people in private collections who are like, we could do this, but again, you could breed them, but will those really be the best ones will they be prepared for the wild? Well, how do you know? Think about like axolotls. There's 1 trillion axolotls in the pet hobby, and there's a handful of them in the wild in one lake in Mexico. Like, yes, could we, I guess, restock axolotls in the wild? Technically,
okay.
But are any of those axolotls prepared to be put into a lake in Mexico?
No. And you could dump all, million of them that are in captivity, and the attrition rate of what survived would probably be so pointless as to make it not even worth it.
We're just feeding fish at that point.
Or it could, I mean, I could be wrong, but couldn't it also negatively affect what is out there in the wild?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So at that point, you could be hurting more than you're helping.
Especially with, when you consider that one of the major mutations in axolotls is a gene that's not even native to any of the salamanders at all. Because
are you saying they don't have
jellyfish?
You saying they don't have jellyfish DNA in the wild? Are you telling me there are not glowing axolotls in Mexico wandering in that lake?
Oh my God.
That seems wrong. Well,
I'm gonna check that reference. I'm gonna have to. I don't.
They've got to be there.
That green glowing jellyfish gene definitely came.
I'll say it like my students. Well, what if someone put a jellyfish in that lake and then they had a baby with an axolotl? Wouldn't that? God, I fucking hate kids sometimes. Y'all see people outside of education will go, no one would say that. They sure as fuck would. If I went to Harvard and had this conversation, they would say it right away. I've had the dumbest. What if we bred this to this? I'm like, that's not how this works.
Today was the first day in argumentative topics So basically we read an article and then they have to identify what the claim is, what the point of the writing is. And we've read everything from like why the government needs to take over the rainforest in South America to like cats make better pets.
Not true.
Which is not true. That's the article showed that it was not true.
That's good.
I mean, I'm going to give them good information. But like today it talked about whether or not you should have to do online school during a snow day. And the kid that said no was from Miami, Florida, where they haven't had snow for 46 years because we looked that up when a kid wanted to know how long it had been since they had
yes,
snow
but they
in
have
Miami.
hurricane days.
And then the kid that said yes lives in New Jersey. And I'm like, they have snow on the ground like 4 out of the 12 months
Yeah, you
of the
have to
year.
be at school.
Like it's not an option. Like this is totally different. So like today was the first day where they were like, but they were like, everything doesn't match. Like you can't just take information from 2 totally different groups and say that it can go to the same claim. And it was like this like light bulb moment went off for all of them, and they understood how to look at opinion. And
SR 373
Y'all
10 years ago,
so excited about
where
this.
they took the northernmost species of boa or of python and said, well, these things can survive
Hey, they
freezing
can live.
temperatures in the wild, so Burmese pythons can go all the way up the
Yeah.
eastern seaboard to
They can be
New
found in
York
DC. They
and
can
all
be
the
found in
way into
DC.
Colorado.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen. That's how we got the
That's
ban
what
on
happens when you put
Burmese
rocks. That's what happens when you put rock scientists in charge of a biology paper.
Hey, look, I had my low kids were making those connections today. My GT kids were not on it today. They were
Yeah,
struggling.
well, this was a
But I
government report that was making that kind of thing.
From rock scientists. Don't give me the geological
I remember
people
that.
telling me where Burmese pythons can live.
I actually read that.
Well, remember,
I
you remember the
that
paper
one.
that like refuted that was they did my favorite kind of experiment, which is like, well, let's put them in an area where it might get cold and see what they do.
Yeah, they only put them in the Savannah River Research Institute, which is in Georgia, and out in the winter
Oh my gosh.
in like 20-degree weather with snow on the ground, and the snakes are sitting out trying to bask in snow and dying.
Yeah.
And the only one that lived was the one that they decided, okay, we need to intervene on these snakes' behalf because they're all going to die.
Well, hell, they had a
And
cold.
it took them 6 months to get that one back to health.
They had
because
a
it got
cold snap in the
horrible,
Everglades.
horrible respiratory infection.
The cold snap in the Everglades killed Burmese pythons. I'm like, I don't need your paper. There it is. It got cold here and they died.
I like when it gets cold enough that their weather channel uses like the frozen iguanas that are upside down.
Yeah,
That always makes
you got to
me
be prepared
laugh.
for when they'll fall out of the sky.
That makes me laugh.
I have family down in that part of the world, and I get regular iguana updates.
I love the story. Again, I don't know how true it is if it's just, but I want to believe it's true. Where the guy like collected a whole bunch of dead ones and then they woke up in his car.
Yeah.
I need that to be true because just the mental picture of these iguanas waking up and going ape shit.
Wreck my car.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would never have them in my car to begin with. Let me back up a little bit.
So
I am smarter than that.
So I looked at most of these answers. So the question for anybody that didn't see it, the question we posted over on Facebook was, how do you think captive breeding and captive care can engage with the current conservation problems? And I think a lot of folks here. So my dad had one. I thought my dad's not a reptile person at all, but he said there aren't many pet hobbies that are so impacted by issues with irresponsible exporting or importing of wild specimens, which is true. Like dog and cat owners don't really have to worry about somebody importing the wrong poodle or something like that. Like we definitely have to pay attention to that, which is also something that drives a lot of laws. We talked about before, our buddy Jason Miller-Radovich was on here about some of the laws they're going to try and pass in Colorado, which got knocked down, thankfully, but it was going to be a tax on every animal you have, every single fish, every snake. And it would have been fucking ridiculous for someone like all of our friends out there that have obviously more than one snake. Our friends over at Colossal Constrictors, Erica and how did I just forget? Randy. They sent me a thing the other day. There's something in Arizona where they're trying to basically, you don't have to have a warrant.
Yes, I have this. That's actually what I'm pulling up on my phone right now.
Yeah, for animal
non-warrant
cruelty.
seizure.
For animal cruelty, in air quotes, because it depends on how they define animal cruelty.
And that's the other thing about it. It is they said that they allow hearsay instead of actual evidence in the conviction.
Yep.
Yeah, so a nosy neighbor who doesn't like someone can then get that person.
Yeah. So I just pulled it up on US ARC because it was in the US ARC email. that came out yesterday. So basically, it's 2 Arizona senators have introduced bills that will allow for the warrantless seizure of animals and private property. So right now, we're protected because of the warrant, and that stops the government from having the unreasonable intrusion into our space. So what the bill is saying, it reads, the formal rules of evidence do not apply, and reliable hearsay is admissible in the post-seizure hearing.
Yeah, and it's written in a way in which people can interpret it however they want.
And yeah, so this is,
But
I mean, not
but
only
again-
that, but this is an issue for anybody from a lower income house that can't afford a lawyer to take it to court. I mean, once their stuff is seized, at that point, it's gone.
But to tie that back into this, those people making those laws have no science background and are getting that stuff from people not using any science behind it. That's how all these animal laws that we have to worry about. There tends to be none of what Bill has done here ever gets applied to any of that.
No, and there's 2 bills. The first bill, the hearing is actually on Thursday, like this Thursday in 2 days. If you have this podcast,
that's going to hit on a lot of other people though. Like the whole, because that's a slippery slope. Going, hey, we don't need to have warrants anymore to come into your house. That's
yeah.
I don't think that will. I would like to think that's not going to pass because that affects way more. Even though it's written for animals, it affects way more than animal people.
Well, and this actually goes on. This article goes on to state like other states that have already tried this have witnessed the seizure and the killing of completely healthy
animals. The
animals.
article says they could give the animal to whoever they want to take care of it, and then you're responsible for paying that person for taking care of your animal.
Yeah, and so it's basically when we give the authorities too much power over that, it becomes a problem.
It's very similar to watching that video in Florida where they went in and killed all those Burmese pythons.
And then they killed the boa as well.
Yeah, and then they killed the boa, which was legal. So going back to the question here with the conservation, though, a lot of people, I don't think for the general, especially the things that are big in the pet trade, that breeding in captivity and releasing is the end goal. I think the big thing is breeding and educating is the end goal. Because I think things like these people making these laws, it's education that they need, And so I think we need to have this stuff bred in captivity, and we need to raise these things in captivity so we can still show it to people. And I used to be a zookeeper, and I fucking hate PETA with every single fiber inside of my body. And PETA's anti-zoo everything. But I've always said, if you take an inner city kid who's never seen a lion at once, they've seen Lion King, that's about it. How can you expect them to want to save that animal? But then you take that kid to a zoo and they're on the other side of the glass from it. And they're watching it roar and stare at them. And that's a connection that will drive that kid possibly to want to conserve that animal, want to save that animal. But if we don't have these things for people to see, we sweep them under the rug basically. And who's going to care about them if they don't see them on a regular basis? And so I think that's where our big part in conservation, as far as a hobby goes, is education. Maybe not, hey, I need to breed a bunch of these just so you can put them in a bucket and go release them in the wild for me.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I think that's where a lot of us, right? That's where we got some of our interests, right? We're going to the zoos and stuff like that. What I had heard a lot from, and what I've seen at least, is, for some of these rarer, harder to keep species, the hobby community has figured out a lot of the nuts and bolts.
Yes.
Right, in terms of how do you, cycling temperature and light levels to induce ovulation is something that came out of the hobby community that the professional committee, I shouldn't say professional, that's the wrong one. The conservation groups might say like, okay, they're trying to figure this out from scratch. The hobbyists have already done a huge bunch of this work. But I think you're absolutely right. Like some of it is definitely like, how do you get interested in these? I feel like it's a requirement that like all of us went to school at some point. The guy came in with the big snake.
Yes.
Am I
We
the
went,
only person
"Whoa."
in this world that doesn't remember this?
Yes, I remember him coming to my school.
Gosh, I
And
don't.
it happened like once in my school. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I know nothing
Fifth
about this
grade.
guy. Whatever happened to him.
5th grade for me. I remember it.
I don't remember.
It's
I
fifth
just
grade.
remember some.
This gets brought up
monster
a
burger
lot
thing.
on our podcast.
But I've been
This
that guy too. I've also been that weird
I've
guy.
been that person. I was that person for the zoo, and when we're not that person for the I've been that person, but I don't
I
remember
will be
having
that person Earth Week for my youngest daughter's school.
Love it.
Yeah, it's like I might have to check my calendar. I might have to be that guy sooner than I want to be. Might have to have like something ready to go. But I think there's there's stuff there that I think the conservation community could really learn from the hobbyist community in terms of how to properly care for these animals, even if your intention is to like just keep them alive long enough to hopefully get them to start breeding.
Yeah.
Odds are somebody in the community's already done it. And
Well,
it's a matter of go ahead.
Well, if the conservation side could work with the private sector, which they don't tend to like to, right? There's a set of rules they got to go by. But if they could, and if they could use some of that funding, then I think you could fund some of these private keepers and help them do this much faster and better. Like if I needed a weird, like big monitor species to breed, I'm betting Mike Stefani at Mike's Monitors can probably do it for me better than some zoo trying to figure out why this lizard on exhibit isn't wanting to lay eggs. Right.
Yeah.
He's got a basement full of zoo type enclosures, and he's got tons of video of them going at it already. He can help you figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah.
But
you look at like
disconnect.
there's because I have to keep referencing books because that's what I do. There was America Snake by Ted Levine it was about the timber rattlesnake in the US. And he references that like in New Hampshire, when they found a bunch of like baby timber rattlesnakes in a spot where they were just not a good place to be, they gave it to Kevin over at NERD.
Yeah.
Because they knew Kevin had a ton of experience with HOTS, for better or for worse. And nobody in that state system knows how to take care of those snakes. They had known Kevin. Kevin raises them. They get to be adults. Work on releasing them at that point. And it just happened to be a very separate serendipitous, like the game warden who found them happened to be the game warden who's dealt with Kevin before. And so I think as you were saying with the monitors, I think there are knowledge bases in these two communities that if they would just talk to each other a little bit more, we might make some real headway in some of these programs. Because if you think about what some of them, like the St. Louis Zoo does the Eastern Hellbenders.
Yeah.
And the facility that they put together for the Hellbenders is ridiculous, like way beyond what I imagine most sort of keepers could do, right? They've got like a 1/4-mile fast-moving cold water stream for these
that's
things.
Cool.
It's an amazing facility. But I can only imagine the trial and error that went into that.
What zoo were we at that had just a shit ton of hellbenders?
The DC Zoo.
Was it DC?
That was when we were in
That's
DC for
right.
the funeral.
They had a crap
It's a
ton.
huge exhibit. And the exhibit is like their lab. Like they have like the windows open so you can see into the
it's just
lab
tanks and tanks of hellbenders. I was like, that's cool.
I would
Yeah.
like tanks and Hellbenders.
I'm pretty sure that's
Yes.
where we were. Was the
Yeah,
DC
it was DC.
Zoo.
I just think conservation it's a weird thing. Like I said, there's a lot of folks in the private sector, and the problem is a lot of times in the private sector, we also are bad at blocking ourselves from stuff. I bring up the Boland's pythons a lot of time, right? It's a $10,000 snake or whatever it is. It's a ridiculous amount. So it's hard to have a conservation program around something that nobody can afford.
Yeah, and like I saw a lot of the comments on the Facebook page, like, it's going to lessen the stress on the wild populations and stuff. And, I don't buy that so much because, when Boland's pythons are catching $10,000 an animal, that's just putting a huge
yeah.
stress on the
And when no
wild
one's
population because
and when no one's breeding them in
everybody,
captivity, so
right, and nobody's breeding them in captivity, which, you know, so you're double screwing those animals because by putting that $10,000 tag on them, you're putting a huge, huge price on their head out in the wild.
well, that's
And
like
then they all come into captivity, and nobody can afford more
look,
than one of
if
them.
you could give 16 Bolin's pythons to Keith McPeak, I think he could finally figure out really how to get them going. Or
Absolutely.
any
But-
of the other guys that are doing that, if you could give them a large enough collection to try enough things, they could figure it out, and then we could have it dialed in and good. But the problem is it's $10,000 snake.
And the horrible thing about that, like you're absolutely right. Like if there's anybody out there that could crack this, I absolutely believe that Keith is one of those people. Keith got out of Bolin's. Keith got out of Bolin's because more and more and more, it was looking like you needed to have like a 2.1 or a 3.1 to be able to instigate really good breeding in those animals. And there's no way that Keith was going to sink $40,000, $50,000 in to those animals. He said it. He's like, he said it hurt him to just get a pair, and he could not drop for 2 more males because that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so in cases like that, you know, saying that the captive industry is actually helping conservation in that, like, I call bullshit.
I get where some people argue. So like blood pythons, right? Blood pythons outside of using them in as pets really are skin trade animals.
Yes.
And so you can try and get them to switch. Go, look, guys, don't kill them, but they're still going to remove them. Like they're still going to catch them and going to sell them to somebody. They're either going to sell them to you as a pet to take out of the wild and never to put anything back, or as a belt.
Well,
like
yes, but no. Over where they do the skin trade stuff a lot, they actually have mass breeding facilities over there. Ptaius carnata, or not Ptaius, stinking goddess, whatever, carnata, the giant king snake, Chinese king snakes over there.
Gotcha.
They have huge, huge breeding facilities for those things, like football-sized stadium breeding facilities for those things. And that's where they raise them for the skin trade and for the meat trade. So that's not even pulling them out of the wild. They're mass breeding them the way like we mass breed chickens and stuff.
But they're not breeding them the way we do alligators, which I think would be a better method.
Yes,
we have to release a certain amount of them back into the wild from what you take.
Yes, and that did help with alligators, and alligators. I mean, about the way we raise them and stuff. I don't know. I don't want to say less prone to seeing this divergence that Bill saw with the garter snakes and stuff, because they're getting, I guess, enough of a varied diet in those pools. They're also they're not raising them completely indoors, so they're getting other things coming in. So they've got a bit more diversity in the diet like they would be having in the wild. But I have also heard studies like in the wild, baby alligators and stuff, they're eating snails, tons and tons of snails. And I know that's not what they're feeding them in these facilities.
Yeah.
No, there is.
Once we get them up to 2 or 3 feet and they're not as prone to being attacked and letting them out, it helps stabilize them, but you're also protecting them in the environment. And this is an aspect that I don't think anybody really thinks about. In addition to the captive breeding and the work that like groups like the Orion Society and stuff are doing, you need to maintain habitats. And James, you made a really good point about those inner city kids who like haven't even seen a squirrel. Their idea of wildlife is a rat on the subway. They're so disconnected from the wild, and any kind of rewilding project that can help there. People make fun of those bus stops that have got like the grass and the stuff growing off the top of them. But those are actually fantastic projects, because by having those little green islands in cities, it's bringing little pockets of nature there too. And so then people are starting to see nature and actually care about nature a little bit more, which then makes them more likely to want to help conserve some of these other areas of nature, which then gives you the habitats, and you can focus on, it sounds stupid, you can focus on smaller things, and that helps bigger things. Like I can't remember, a couple years ago, like everybody lost their mind over the fact that California declared a species of bumblebee as a fish.
Oh yeah, I remember
And
that.
like it was a stupid legal mumbo jumbo, but it was a way they could protect the bumblebee, to protect the habitat, to prevent the whole area from becoming a mine dredge, which would have not just wiped out the bumblebee, but it would have wiped out all this wildlife.
Well, as someone
because
who
somebody
teaches-
cared enough about the bumblebee to find that loophole, you have protected hundreds of species.
Well, as someone who teaches high school kids, I see on a regular basis how and I've done it. I've taught now for 13 years. I've seen the disconnect from nature happen more and more. And so when I teach more classification than any teacher I know, because I really enjoy just going through all of the orders and classes and going through all the mammals and all, and showing them things, because you'll show them something they had no idea it was real. I've had kids see pictures of rhinos and think that they were dinosaurs because they had a horn, like that, or ask if pterodactyls were still alive. Like, you know how many kids I've had to convince that mermaids aren't real? Like, it's insane. I showed them a video of a giraffes fighting, and then I've asked how many of y'all have ever seen a giraffe. We're 30 minutes from a zoo with giraffes. 30 minutes. And like one kid raised their hand, they've seen a giraffe. I'm like, how do you not get, the zoo's 30 minutes away? They've got
They have
giraffes there.
3 days too.
So it's this, we've got to use this hobby to drive conservation. Again, not so much in breeding always, but in educating and getting people to realize things exist. It's,
I think another
yeah,
good example of
especially
people caring. Oh, sorry, go ahead,
go ahead,
Bill.
Bill.
No, I was gonna say the habitat thing is a really crucial point, because like we were talking about the axolotls before, and like, yeah, you could breed 3 million axolotls, but if they're in a pond that is no bigger than a kitchen table, like that doesn't matter. That habitat is not, it's not sustainable. There's nothing you can do if there isn't more of that type of habitat for these animals to move into. So yeah, like with the Orient Society, where they're trying to buy up huge sections of these longleaf pine habitat and some of these other habitats where you might be able to have someone or have, you know, these animals still there. And then also picking the bumblebee and a fish one is a great example where you're like, here's a way to protect a species that also then protects all of these other ones that we can't get through the pipeline, right? Like, you know, you protect gophers, tortoises in Florida, and you're starting to protect owls and lizards and
Rattlesnakes
and indigo snakes, and like you get these sort of keystone species, right? Is the popular word. And to do that, you have to preserve the habitat, and you're preserving all these things. And it really has to go a long way to getting those animals. And you don't protect the habitats until you can get people to buy into that they're important.
Well, yeah, and it's you know, I sat through a meeting once on Louisiana pine snakes, and it was a meeting basically on the law. It was the logging industry having a meeting, and they brought in a state person to talk about the snake as well. You know, it's hard to get loggers to want to save Louisiana pine snakes or woodpeckers, because there's another one there. Because the moment they find the snake there, or they find the woodpecker there on their property, they can't cut down trees anymore, and they can't make money. And then the animal rights person goes, well, they shouldn't. You can't look at it. You can't yell at them for wanting to make money. They've got to survive also. And so that's another thing. You've got to get them to respect those animals enough to want to set that land aside, and we've got to find a way to also allow them to still survive and make a living. You've got to do it on both sides. I heard people talk stories in that thing where people would find the woodpeckers on their land and then go out and cut that tree down right away. That way the state didn't find the woodpecker on the land, and they could say, they're not here, we can keep logging, right? And so you've got to get them to respect and enjoy these animals enough that they see their value in survival, and that the pure value and money that they get from this land doesn't overcome the need to keep that animal alive. And that's a tricky thing, because, you know, yes, educating the children is the best bet, but the child still goes home to a parent. If that parent is a logger or is in the oil field and they need to make money, and they're all of a sudden the government saying you can't do it through this area because we got to save whatever it is, some butterfly, right? And I'm not downplaying a butterfly, but you know, that's how it will get downplayed by the person that's like, I need to make money, I don't care about that butterfly. And so you've got to get them to respect the animal for what it is and its importance, and find a way to live with it. And that's the hard part.
Well, and it's like you said, you've got, it's not just about getting the kid, it's about getting the parents, it's about getting the community.
Yeah.
And that's where I was going when, I interrupted Bill.
What a jerk, Travis.
Yeah, I know I am horrible. But he was talking about the New Hampshire rattlesnake. I believe there's a whole island up there that they have basically just made an off limits area for those rattlesnakes. And it's the community that rallied behind it because people explained how important these are and how really rare it is for that population to be where it is. And they got the people to care. So now they've got a whole area that the community itself has put aside, and the community cares enough about it that they wanted that put aside and they wanted these animals cared for. And it's not look, the only good snake is a dead snake and it's rattlesnakes and I kill them because they're rattlesnakes. It's look, we know they're rattlesnakes, but these are important and these are our rattlesnakes. And so no, you don't get to kill them. And not only do you not get to kill them, this is their special place and we like having them here.
So I can show you where there's definitely a disconnect. So when I do a classification, I show animals and someone sees an animal they think is weird they've never seen. So many people always go, well, what does that thing do? Or what's the purpose for that? I'm like, to exist. The purpose for that is to exist. It is there in that ecosystem. And I tell my kids all the time, there's only one species on Earth that you can completely wipe out and the planet gets better. Only one. And it's us. That is the only animal. We are the only animal that is really, you take it out of an ecosystem and it gets better. We quit killing shit. We quit polluting shit. And it's fine. We've got to find a way to live with the things that deserve to be there. And you can't think of everything as having to have a purpose that serves you. And that is the problem is a lot of people, when they see an animal, they've got to either find it cute or entertaining or useful. And if it's not, we don't need it. It's fine. Right. And so there's that education of why you've got to explain all of these things are important in an ecosystem. And it's tricky. Like I said, all the time, I get kids go, what's the reason for that? Or what's the purpose of that animal? To be there. Millions of years of evolution.
You can find purposes if you stop and think, only good snake's a dead snake. Well, great. I guess that means you like having rats in your house.
I need to send you our daughter's presentation that she did on Snakes Matter. That was what she did her STEM fair on. I have a conference. I have a conference.
I saw that you took a picture of her.
That was all I did. It was so bad.
You should have taken a picture of the different panels of the project and put up in the post with her.
I know. I was slacking so bad.
So there's one thing I do want to bring up to Bill, and it has nothing to do with it kind of does. You've definitely not done the research on this animal, but
I have something I want to talk about.
You do evolution and anatomy, and I just wanted your 2 cents on this because this one animal blows my mind.
I think I know what this is.
It's the fucking crested gecko.
I knew that's where we were going with
All right, so I just need to remind people, this is a lizard that we thought was functionally extinct at one point. We then found it, and we brought it over here. I am firmly under the impression that we only found the dumb ones. I 100% think there's a whole population of intelligent ones out there. We found the helmet-wearing, window-licking, stupid ones, and that's why they just jump off into fucking space. The other thing that I don't understand is the tail, right? So they are a weird one in their group. A lot of other individuals that they're related to drop their tails and then regrow them. But this one has evolved to drop it and never grow it back, which would be fine if they didn't actually fucking use the tail. It's a prehensile tail. What kind of evolution goes, this is really functional and it can help keep you alive? You get one shot.
So, this is going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. All right. Here we go. I know you know this. Just because something evolved in one group does not mean it has to evolve in every group.
Yes, I get that.
Right? For our listeners who may not be on that, you don't have to be good or the best in terms of natural selection and evolution. You just need to be good enough, long enough to pass your genes on.
Yeah.
So if enough of these And I agree. I've had a crested gecko in my time, and
They're stupid. They're just stupid.
Yeah, there's no nice way of saying it.
They jump into space. I've never seen an animal that just says, fuck it, I'll just take my chances.
Yeah.
Ours hasn't jumped in the classroom in a while.
Yours has fallen off the side of the tank before.
No, so what he does is he jumps from one side of his tank to the other, and then we'll randomly hear this smack when he hits the glass. And the kids are like, it's just Charlie. Like, they don't even care anymore. They're just like, whatever. He hasn't done that in a while, though.
But if they're they might have come from ancestors that had the ability to drop and regrow a tail. And because their tail is now way more used for other things, right, for being prehensile, they might have lost the ability to regrow it, but there's been no long-term negative effect of them dropping it.
Well, and Jeff said in the chat, it could be a midpoint in the evolution to a fully tailless crested gecko, where, like you said, they could have had a function, and over time, it will not serve an importance.
Oh, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, if it doesn't do them any harm and it doesn't cost them anything to drop the tail in terms of their reproductive output, then keep dropping the tail.
Okay.
Just such a weird evolution. I mean, like I said, it would not boggle my mind as much if they didn't fucking use it.
Is it my turn?
That's the part that's
no,
like,
because I'm going to interrupt James.
Okay,
now
go ahead.
because,
I'll wait.
You know, you're obsessing over the fact that evolution has to make sense, and the problem
natural
there
selection
is
does. I'm just trying to figure out the natural selection there.
James, makes sense to who?
Me, damn it! All of it needs to make sense to me. It's the only one that matters.
You know, I don't necessarily disagree with you that I think we managed to get the window licking.
Yeah, there's an intelligent group that's living up high in the trees that we haven't seen.
Like, but nobody's out there studying how they behave in the wild. If you go out there and you do in-depth studies of how they behave in the wild, it may become absolutely apparent to you why having a tail that falls off and doesn't grow back makes perfect sense.
I mean,
there's a second part of this, the presumed to be functionally extinct but then found again. It's possible that splinter population is a bottleneck population, and that the original stock of crested geckos were able to regenerate their tail, but the smaller bottleneck population that then got explanted and is now able to stabilize had a gene mutation defect that prevents them from growing back that tail. And you've just got a bizarre fluke population that's all that's left, because the main population, the original body of those animals could regrow their tail. And this side population now that is all that is left, because of that genetic bottleneck, this is just a perpetual defect, and it's where they are.
And
now.
That would make more sense to me, because if you look across lizards that regrow their tails, we understand they regrow their tail because, one, they lose the tail. It helps give them a chance to survive. Something spends time eating the tail and they run off. And the assumption is they can grow another one and they can do it all over again. I would guess that losing their tail does not have an effect on survival. They're not having to pull something into eating their tail, or else they would still be doing it and be growing a new one so that the next time something tried to eat them. Like, you would think that nature would have chose it that way if that's the way it's chosen basically across lizards in general.
Well, so hypothetically, what if we thought about like this scenario? So I've got a splinter population, right? One group that can regrow its tail, one group that can't. And the one that is regrowing its tail, those are energy and material resources that are going into building that tail. What if my group that can't regrow its tail instead invests that energy into more young? And then over a couple of generations, you've now basically pushed those out. So it might appear to be a defect, right? So I taught human anatomy for a while, and one of the I guess fun, not fun examples of this is testosterone in humans, because it makes males bigger, stronger. We get this wonderful facial hair that comes in.
Some of us.
And so nobody on this call in particular, But you get these, and in theory, in our history, being bigger and more aggressive led to more mating opportunities. Once you sort of cross into your 40s and 50s and 60s, testosterone does a lot of negative things to us. Some of it makes like hair thinning is a testosterone thing, right? Part of the reasons that men have higher rates of heart disease and like arteriosclerosis, part of that is a testosterone thing. So that is super detrimental.
Wait, is that like a lack of testosterone that causes that?
Overdose.
It's
too
an
much
overdose.
testosterone.
It's too much when you're younger. But that thing that thing that made you like a potentially super attractive mate when you were younger, even if it's completely like, if we made it ridiculous and said that like men with high testosterone all die at the age of 60, doesn't matter, because at that point you've already passed your genes on, and if it made you if it made you better at reproducing early on, then who cares? Like that's what's going to win.
It's the peacock tail.
Yeah.
You get a bigger and bigger tail until you can't fly away. So you're a much easier prey item, but it doesn't matter because you've already knocked up all the ladies, and now all of your babies are going to have those tails. And it's not just that, but all of your female progeny are going to carry that gene for great big tails to give to their sons.
Okay.
So it kind of feeds back on itself.
This is all fun because I'm giving a test on evolution on Thursday.
Are you?
Yeah. It's one of my favorite subjects to talk about. So I brought that one because it's always one in the hobby where I'm like, I don't fucking get them.
My turn.
Go.
Okay, so I have an article from ABC 13, and my mom sent me this today, and it's actually a very interesting article. And then I was like, oh, we're talking to Travis tonight. And then I was like, oh, we're talking to this other sciencey guy. I'm so sorry, I didn't know you very well.
The other sciencey guy.
And then I was like,
I've been called worse.
It's on his
and then
resume.
there's James. James will have lots of opinions because he has opinions about everything. So
They're not opinions, they're facts. I'm right.
I've been wanting to talk about this all day. So there's an article, and in
Just read the damn article.
in Charlotte, or in Hendersonville, North Carolina, there is an aquarium and a shark lab.
The stingray that got pregnant.
Okay, so yes, have you guys heard about the stingray?
It's been floating around Facebook.
Oh, damn it! I'm just now getting to this party. Here's my question though.
So
Go ahead,
Okay.
tell us.
So the stingray, who's 12 to 14 years old, has never been around any males in her tank.
okay.
And they put 2 male bamboo sharks in her tank. Now she is pregnant.
Okay.
And
I'm gonna go with Partho.
I am too.
I'm going to go with Partho too.
I know.
It's a shark and a ray. I mean, they are
somewhat.
somewhat related, but they're not that related.
The article talks about how, people have written in and she's done research and they can hold male sperm for years, but she's never been around a male before. And they were like, but they've noticed that there's bite marks on her body, which is a habit of mating with the sharks.
Also a habit of just a shark.
In general. So, the other much more likely scenarios that she's going through.
Not the other much more likely.
Well,
I'm
reading the article.
The only possible scenario
is that she's going
now,
through.
you're reading a pop sci article and not an actual research article.
Of course.
And
This
pop
is
sci
me we're
articles
talking
are
about.
always going to go
I
for the
loved it.
flash and the bang. Like,
Well, yeah.
I posted an article into the group this week of I think the headline read, "Scientists find snake clitoris." Very exciting.
I saw that.
And it's like, like that is the
feels like I did not write that paper.
that is
was
the
not-
most clickbait way to get
It really
people
is.
to read an article that, like, when you actually read the article, it's not all that.
Oh, yeah.
Like the
'Cause this-
actual article, but nobody's gonna read a scientific discovery of a functional organ akin
Yeah.
to
Well,
clitoris.
this title says
herpetology,
it says stingray possibly impregnated by shark, and I'm like, oh hell no! And
But you're
I clicked on the link.
also reading that article into a podcast of animals that we are very familiar with
I know.
parthenogenesis
So,
happening.
anyways, at the end of the article, it talks about how, and I'm assuming this.
Speaking
is
of
true.
Warren Booth, who we talked about earlier.
No. So this talks about how apparently they've studied parthenogenesis in sharks, which is very common. And they talked about a bamboo shark that they have at another part of their facility who's actually had 14 different episodes with parthenogenesis.
Well,
And this says that apparently with this particular stingray, it's a very rare process. And so what I'm wondering, and yes,
So
Jeff
Jeff
just
said
said this.
the testosterone and other hormones.
So my question was, do you think that the possible attempting to breed by the sharks triggered something in her body?
Can we stop pretending the sharks are trying to breed with it?
No, okay, whatever. But
I don't
around
think the
that,
sharks
it
are breeding
triggered.
with it.
But maybe them being in the water triggered her response.
Jeff said the testosterone and other hormones in the water column probably triggered a reproductive event. I believe that.
That's what I'm wondering.
It's possible that the presence of males of a
Bill does not look intrigued by this.
related species
Bill's saying, how can I disprove this?
might have initially triggered some kind of pre-breeding behavior. Now, I
Travis
don't
is used
know.
to be-
I do not know enough about sharks and rays.
Oh, I don't either.
I
No,
do-
I'm not
I do know
talking
enough
out
to
my-
know
I'm,
just-
I'm most likely talking out of my ass.
I
But
know
Travis-
that they didn't breed.
Travis, I know enough to know they didn't fuck each other.
I mean, I know.
I know.
that.
Oh, I'm not saying that they mated with each other, but
Right.
the presence of the males, and if the males are even biting and nipping at her, and inducing behavior that would cause this animal to feel like it was breeding behavior, it could induce that parthenogenesis and make it
So
much
what-
more likely.
So what you're saying is this
Now,
Ray's got
I'm
some
not saying
kinks.
that's absolutely what's happening. I'm just saying this is a hypothesis that we could look
Right.
at. There
Yeah.
is some argument that, the parthenogenesis that we see in the hobby is as common as it is because the introduction of males will trigger females into a breeding cycle. Whether or not they actually lock with the male, it can cause that parthenogenic, event just because the male is there and it triggers them. Whereas if you don't have the male with them, they're much less likely to start down a breeding cycle, which is what you need to at least start the parthenogenic effect.
All right, Travis.
So, hold on.
Let's let Bill chime
Well,
in.
yeah,
He's
Bill
sitting
needs
there.
to chime in too.
Exactly.
And
Bill's
I'm
just
more than
sitting
happy to
there
have
staring.
Bill tell me that I'm being an idiot. Or,
I have one
I'm
more
waiting
question.
for Warren to come out of the
look,
woodwork.
Okay, so I'm covering my face because if Warren watches this, I'm gonna feel so bad because I don't actually retain anything that he talks about when he talks about.
I'm up with our guest chat.
parthenogenesis.
I'm up with our person in the chat that says don't kink shame this thing. She just likes to be nibbled on.
I mean,
Calm down.
Travis is used to this because I don't retain much when we talk about genetics either. So this is why he's totally used to like bringing me down from my ledge. But so the article talked about how she would be a clone. That's basically what parthenogenesis
Partho, yes.
is. So
Well,
So will they be able to like do blood work from this baby stingray to
Yes.
show that it's a partho baby?
Yeah.
Okay.
they
that
just
was
call
my
up
next
Warren.
question.
He'll do it for him.
No,
I'm like,
Warren won't
please
do that
don't be
anymore.
mad at me, Warren.
That's right.
I'm so
Warren's
sorry.
done. He is done. He's done with Partho.
Yeah,
I'm so
Warren's
sorry.
done with his partho
It's-
stuff.
but
He's
it's-
doing fun stuff with bed bugs and other
Bed
urban
bugs,
pests,
right.
which is cool stuff.
The problem with calling it a clone is a lot of that also depends on sex chromosomes of a species
Gotcha.
because it's not always a true clone because the female can
So-
sometimes give birth to males depending on how the sex chromosomes are. Like XY chromosomes, yes, it would be.
So a parthenogenic baby is not necessarily a clone,
Uh,
whereas a clone would be a parthenogenic baby.
It depends on
It's like the isopod
type
roly-poly
of
thing.
parthenogenesis that
Yeah.
happens.
Okay.
So usually what we see is something where they're half clones because it's a duplication of only half of the genome to create a complete genome. Which is how we get these visual animals from het type animals
it's-
in the hobby.
It's ZW, isn't it ZW reptiles that give birth to the opposite sex?
Yes.
Right. Because of the way the chromosomes work out, that the male is the homozygous
The male
one.
is the homo. Yeah. The males
Well,
are
no homo.
WW and the females are WZ.
So
Or maybe are they ZZ? I can't remember. But yes, the males are the homogametic and the females are the
no,
heterogametic
no
in
homo.
the ZWs.
All right, Bill, chime in.
Well, that's how you confirm, right? In Warren stuff with the copperheads, right? It was you had to test the male. And that was really the only way you'd know for sure that it was partho. I am inclined to agree with Travis that I think it's more behavioral than it is potentially like just testosterone or its analog in the water. I know more about sharks than rays. I know that there are in some of the reef sharks that do the like biting, that in the presence of males and males start start nipping at the females, you will see like the females, like their skin gets a lot thicker. They because they're having to deal with these bites and whatnot. So in theory, while also not king shaming the ray, like it could be something similar where if the sharks are even just because there's another thing in their tank, if they're just nipping at her, it could trigger a sort of
Yeah.
behavioral cascade.
That's what I was thinking.
Look, she's been alone for a long time.
She has.
A little bit of attention
I'm
is being
kind of
given to
excited
her.
about all this.
She's finally getting some attention.
I got to start following this though, because I am invested and I need to know what happens now.
I will
don't know
eat
who
my
that is.
words if a half shark, half ray pops
Hell
out.
no,
And
I will not eat
I will
my
be the
words.
first
I
one
will
to admit,
deny
like,
that
I
shit
was
to the
wrong.
end.
Well, as
It
a
didn't
friend of mine,
happen.
a friend of mine just texted me who's watching this. Her and her friends have been making the joke that, well, that's how guitar fish originally came around. So
Anyways, my mom sent me that article and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm totally bringing that up.
floated
tonight.
around on several Facebook pages, and I saw that.
Well, I'm late to the party.
We're getting close on time, but I do
I
want one other evolution thing I'm always interested in, since Bill does evolution and you talked about Sambos earlier. I find the evolution of egg laying and live birth in many reptiles interesting, especially since I've read things before, especially with Samboas. You know, you've got Arabian Samboas and Saharan Samboas, which both lay eggs. But that evolution has not been not one direction thing. They've gone back and forth over time. Have you ever looked into any of that with some of the other boas or other snakes and how that works?
So I've done a little bit out of idle curiosity because we get, in New England, we have almost entirely live bearing snakes.
Yeah. I would imagine temperature is the reason.
So that's the kind of hypothesis, right? That it's easier to, keep developing young at a higher temperature. Totally makes sense.
There's a skink in Australia that I always reference to my kids that is currently going through visual evolution, basically. The ones in higher elevation are keeping their eggs internal and hatching them internally and releasing them. And the ones in lower, warmer elevations are still laying eggs, burying them in the ground, and they're hatching. But yet right now they are still considered the same species, even though they are obviously evolving different methods of birth.
I'll add a little bit to that. It's not just that. They actually had a documented case where one of those skinks I think she laid 3 eggs, and then like a month later, popped out a live baby.
I remember seeing that too. Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, I'd have to. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one.
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the skinks, right? If they're becoming distinct species, we certainly don't have the time to dig into this. Like, how do you start to define what different species are? Which is always a fun argument to have.
We had that argument today between me and other science teachers. I always say the definition we always use in biology for high school, although is right-ish and probably enough for a high school student, is not right enough for past that, right? We always say if a species can interbreed, they are the same species. But we know that's not true and produce viable offspring. But we know as reptile people, we've seen people breed ball pythons to every fucking python out there.
Yeah.
And they produce viable offspring. And so I always, tend to say organisms with similar characteristics and can interbreed. So like lions look the same and can interbreed. Lions and tigers don't look the same, but can interbreed different species. Right.
Yeah. But back to your original question about the eggs and the transition stuff. So there's for a lot of the snakes, right? They don't have true placentas, right? The ones that are doing the live bearing. So in terms of anatomical distinction between those that retain eggs and those that lay young, it's not that big of a switch. And there could be a lot of reasons to go back and forth, right? We talked a little bit about temperature, but just suitable nesting habitat, where if you've got a population, and let's be utterly ridiculous. You've got a desert animal that suddenly moves, a chunk of its population moves into a swampy habitat. And now there is no longer any viable habitat for you to lay eggs in. If you just, not too many things have to switch for you to retain those eggs. Again, if it gives you the advantage in the new environment, right? If you're the invader in the new environment and it gives you that advantage, fantastic. You do that for a couple generations and they start pushing out to the other side, of this little swamp, and they hit the arid region again that maybe is better suited for egg laying. It's not completely impossible to think that you could see that switch happen a few times as they sort of move through different environments. That's like one possible example where that could happen, right? Certainly, if you're changing like elevation, if you're moving up an elevational gradient, if it helps you survive and reproduce a little bit better,
yeah,
it's certainly doable.
Well, and Jeff said something about, he said the whole thing was interesting, but what about birds? He said maybe birds learn better nest building instead of adapting to live birth. And I would argue, birds, we agree mostly they evolved from dinosaurs, right? Which were egg laying animals. And then the bird lifestyle, I would assume the bird lifestyle of having to fly, find food, feed, that probably is not the best lifestyle for carrying young for a long term and still being able to function. So I would not see the benefits of evolving to what mammals do and carrying it the way we do. Like, and they may be. I mean, look, get back to me in 5 million years. Birds may be given live birth. But I would say because of the path of where they evolved from and the lifestyle that they've evolved to live, it makes sense to me to lay an egg where that you can leave and still function and come back.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of like precocial birds the way you do. Like if you think about what we assume are the kind of early mammals, the early sort of true mammals, you are seeing more like the young are either born early, and if you're thinking about like the marsupials, right? The young are born super underdeveloped, and they are able to kind of latch on and stay tiny to the point where they are big enough they're able to function on their own. You don't see that in birds. You don't see birds young, like they don't stay very, very small relative to the size of the parents early on in development, right? Even when they hatch, they are very, very much super dependent offspring till, for a while. And they're fairly close to adult, a lot of them anyway. I think of a lot of the smaller songbirds. They're pretty close to adult size by the time they actually are independent beings, sort of independent of their parents, right? And they might not look the same, right? A lot of the gulls go through. I hate gulls because they're so hard to identify, right? They look different. They have different colors. They have different patterns, but they're still big birds relative to the adults. So if you're trying to transition to live bearing in something like the birds, I mean, you'd have to change so much of the timing of that development. That would be wild.
Yeah, and you talk about birds.
So much of the physiology of the animal itself, like for a bird to carry a live thing inside of it.
Well, and energy requirements. The energy requirement for a bird is different than, say, some of our snakes or lizards that give live birth, right? Snakes and lizards, slower metabolism. So if they're not eating for a long period of time, they're still okay. Birds don't tend to have a ton of fat buildup on them, and they tend to burn through energy a little faster than others. So I would say that. And then Jeff said flightless birds, but flightless birds still would have evolved along the line of the rest of the birds from dinosaurs and all that. So they're still evolving from having eggs, and probably have not found, there has not been a natural selection and reason to not lay eggs still. Right. Whereas the mammals that were alive at that same time weren't laying eggs, unless you get to Australia, which we talked about the marsupials, and then there's the monotremes. It's just a fucking weird island. Everything there doesn't make sense.
Yeah, none of the flightless birds have to deal with the super large predators the way the other ones do.
Yeah. They said if they evolved from dinosaurs, that makes sense. They never had in their genetics to give live birth. Yeah. Where squamates would have evolved a different path. Those reptiles evolved a different path. And again, that having eggs and not having, they still technically, we call it, like you said earlier, we call it live birth, but it's not. It's jelly-filled eggs that they hold inside. And in the case of that's even different. So we talked sand boas, right? They hatch out of the jelly-filled eggs internally and then come out a snake. Whereas if, like, we talk about boas, you get a big old jelly-filled mess of snake and clear eggshells, basically. So it's still an egg. It's just not an egg in the sense that we tend to think of like a ball python egg. So I don't know. The whole evolution of not having legs is interesting. The whole evolution of how how they give birth, all the different types that we have, and then the evolution of the teeth, and then some having venom, and some the way they deliver venom through their teeth is always. It's just snakes in general are a large evolutionary clusterfuck that is very interesting. And sometimes doesn't make sense. Like, let's go with boas. South America, Madagascar, part of Africa, part of Asia. And then we have pythons scattered in there together. And we're like, well, they're related, but they're far enough separated. Why are they still like, why do we have them in Madagascar and on Africa and we have pythons here and boas there? Like, it's a weird thing.
Well, I would guess that's because they're all from the original southern landmass that was connected through Antarctica and, that relic population when it broke up.
But you know where to like the sand boas and the calibars? That's a weird branch to branch. And then you get into the like what you have with the Indonesian boas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Pandoya, that's a weird group.
Yeah. But if you go back geologically and you fit that puzzle all together, you're looking at areas that were all tied together,
But it's just weird. You don't find pythons in South America, right?
Because they had a different origin range.
Yeah, it's just the range of them in general. It's just it's an odd group, and then to have your vipers evolve out of that and evolve the way they did. I don't know. Snake evolution is very interesting. I enjoy snake evolution.
I'm with you on that one.
There's so much I feel like you can study in snake evolution and in their anatomy that it's kind of never ending if you're just in that realm. Someone outside of it, they may go, well, it's just snakes. But I'm like, yeah, but there's a lot of different types. I mean, look at like the kukris. That's a weird fucking snake. Yes. Or like stiletto snakes. If you're going with teeth, they can bite you with their mouth closed. That's a weird snake.
If you want to have fun with morpho, go morpho source the stiletto snake skull. Those things are disturbing. Those skulls are disturbing.
Yeah, the way that fang kind of like the way it's rooted in the maxilla and the upper jawbone.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It is a very strange skull.
Or then you look at like gaboon vipers. Why do they need 2-inch long fangs? Like an inch would have done the job. It'd been fine. Still, size doesn't matter, Travis. It still would have worked. But anyways, we've been on for too long. We got to get going. Both of y'all are in the weird time zone where it's later. Ugh. Nasty Eastern time zone.
I'm just hungry. And I needed to take my cough medicine like an hour ago.
Well, you haven't died yet. Bill, thanks for coming on. I was very excited about this. I knew Travis would be. That was why I told Travis to come on because.
No, this was awesome.
Yeah, this was great. I had a great time.
And I'm sure I could probably have you on and we could talk about some other stuff too. We could actually talk about frogs and salamanders jumping at some point.
Yeah, I have questions about that.
So about salamander jumping.
We might have to have you back on.
Oh no, what will I do?
Hellbenders don't.
If you
jump.
ever need your college kids to like present to elementary age kids like virtually, let me know.
Yes, our English teacher over here does the.
I'm also in charge of the zoology club at my school. Yeah.
English teacher with like 8 animals in her classroom.
They could literally just talk about the process of how they do a scientific experiment, and that would be like amazing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And that would be cool. I'll reach out.
Bill, if anybody wanted to reach out to you and see your articles, your research you've done, how can they do that?
If you want to, you can shoot me an email. It's just billryerson@gmail.com.
Wow, you were looking up. Oh, that's a weird enough last name though. If you.
Yeah, I'm also a little bit older, so I was an early adopter. got on way early.
That's what people make fun of my Hotmail email. And I'm like, I tried the Gmail later on. It didn't exist. So I just have Hotmail.
That's right. I might still have a Hotmail somewhere, probably. Absolutely. I'm happy because I'm always happy to work with people and, I'm always happy to answer questions and talk to people. So absolutely.
And he needs those arboreal snake striking videos, guys.
Yeah. And also, I know some of us, and I hope it's not just me, that sometimes when we like lose animals, we hold on to them in freezers places.
Yes, I think I still have some.
There's some in the freezer, yeah.
I also am very, very dedicated. I'm hoping to start a little bit better understanding of exotics in veterinary medicine.
Oh, nice.
And since I teach anatomy, potentially there are uses for those. So if people have something like that they're willing to sort of send my way, I'm happy to give them full credit and whatever they might need.
Awesome. So yeah, for all those dead animals you have in your freezer right now, because we just end up piling them up in there and there's no space and then we throw them away. Get a hold of Bill. He wants your dead animals and tree snake striking. That's his
videos of your live animals and your dead animals.
Travis, if people want to get a hold of you for some reason.
Travis Wyman on Facebook. I'm not the motocross racer. Don't go messaging him about snakes. He'll probably
have you ever messaged him, Travis?
No.
I want you to message you just once and go, hey man, have you ever gotten snake questions?
I will do that. I will take that. Will be my job between now and the next podcast.
Message that
I'm
guy.
gonna reach out to this guy.
I want to reach out to him and be like, just out of curiosity.
I'm Snakes and Bakes on Instagram.
Before anybody gets excited, it's not about weed.
No, it's not about weed.
He bakes cupcakes.
He bakes lots more than cupcakes. His pretzels are really good.
And they're not special brownies. They're just brownies. So don't get excited. And then Travis's email. Go ahead, Travis, with the email. You want to give me an email? Weird ass email.
ASPLUNDII @gmail.com.
Somebody,
I know James.
Fucking plants. Weird ass plant.
Look, I was really big into carnivorous plants for a while before I really converted over to being big into reptiles. So.
But at no point did you realize that you would like to be able, like, for people to actually email you and know what your email is and not just guess. They hear that and they're just gonna start guessing letters. It's got an E in there somewhere. I don't know.
I got a 7. Where did you get a 7?
see, that's the thing, James. That way, the people who actually, like the people who really actually want to talk to me will talk to me, and the people who just want to like bother me or are more interested in trying to make fun of me and pretend that I'm not actually a doctor, they don't do it because they don't actually take the time to learn how to spell.
You're not a real doctor. What the hell do you know?
I mean, I thought he was a teacher for the first year that we knew him. So
don't know how to wash my hands either.
Travis, have you talked to Jeff about your logo?
Jeff was talking to me some about it.
Jeff, please fix his god awful logo.
Again. She wasn't part of that.
Oh, that's right. That was
you weren't part of that conversation. You need to go back and listen to 199 with Jason and I.
His logo.
James basically spends half of it shredding my logo and my company name.
It doesn't take much. It's a horrible logo.
But he has probably one of the best photographs ever of himself that his wife took.
That's fine. His logo is hot garbage.
The one in the black? My God, is my favorite picture of Travis.
Mine too. You don't know how much I stare at that picture,
and
Travis.
It's funny that you brought up your beard earlier because when I sat down, I was like, this is not the beard that he has on his picture online. This is a very nice beard. It's very awesome.
I just real quick before we go, just so everybody, hold on, wait a second, wait for it. Hold on. It's coming. That's his god awful logo. That's his logo.
Oh,
I can't. There's nothing I can say.
See,
Travis, I love you. I got nothing.
It's like a Boy Scout award or something. I don't know what it's.
It looks like a military award.
It does, like the bars you wear for something. It's, and then just the font. It's generic font from Paint.
But I bet he did that all on his own.
Oh, I guarantee it's all on his own.
No, he did.
No one else is
taking credit for that. We had this whole conversation with Jason.
No. Have a Reptile Gumbo sexy doctor's calendar. Yikes. We're going to skip on that one, I think, Jeff. That's a bad idea. Anyways, so hilarious. Jeff, please help him out. That logo is a crime. To all logos everywhere. It is.
James and I will get around to it when James and I get around to it. I'm not in a huge rush. And again, like I said, Jeff is my friend. And I appreciate Jeff as my friend, and I have no expectations for him to do it or anything like that.
As your friend, there's no way he wants you to go around with that as your logo.
You could use AI to create a logo.
I tried that. They kept misspelling shit.
No. I would not do that because that is basically stealing and copyright infringement on so many other real artists.
And
I played around with it the other night.
They train the AIs by feeding them other artists' art,
Oh.
and then it like basically just takes pieces of their art and cannibalizes it in.
Bill, have you ever thought about having AI just go ahead and write your research for you? Just
We
check
had,
GPT that stuff.
I reviewed a paper a couple months ago that was clearly someone they had an AI write a section of it.
How'd you feel? Did you respond to them and go, get the shit out of my face?
I can't remember I'm sure what I said was very professional at the time, but there was
Not in your
definitely
head.
not in my head, no.
I luckily don't have my kids write stuff where that's an issue, but I can't imagine a teacher
I lock the
or a
browsers
professor
down, so it's not an issue.
where someone has to write stuff. You can lock the browsers down all you want, but like if it's something they have to take home,
no.
and there's apps on their phone, you can get it anywhere now. I just can't imagine having to grade
homework.
shit now with AI.
I've switched it on them, so I will ask the AI my exam question, and I'll give my students the AI's answer and have them say, okay, why is this wrong? And make sure you look by like real.
That is a
That
genius.
is brilliant. I'm totally gonna use that.
Especially in like my field where it's like, so explain the evolution of skull as you're going through from
I
like
could
sharks.
totally have AI write stuff that's grammatically incorrect for my kids to correct and edit. This is brilliant.
Found more ways to do less work.
Yes.
Good job. All right.
Smarter, not harder.
Absolutely.
Let's get out of here. Bill, Travis, hang around a second. Everybody else, good night. We'll be back next week with somebody. Throw on the calendar. I'll figure it out. We have a guest
On the
next week.
calendar, you've got the next couple of weeks lined up.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Check out our friends over at Little Shop of Horrors, VivTech. Remember code Gumbo22, save you 15%. Go check out Herp's Reptile shows for one near you soon. And good night, guys.
Bye.
Bye.